It is 7 o'clock on Tuesday, December 10th, and I will call this meeting of the Stow Board of Selectmen to order. And our first order of business, as always, is public input from any interested members of the public on anything not on the agenda. Hello, we have some late arrivals. Anything? Public input? Nothing. Okay.
Hi.
Oh, friends of Brian, that's nice.
They're here to show that I do have friends. How much did you pay?
We always wonder. It's good to see you.
Exactly.
And both of them showed up tonight.
Yeah. Oh, Don, nice. Chairman's comments, if I can find, I got a lot of blue folders here. Just a few things. I want to thank Karen Stams and the Lions Club for Saturday night's tree lighting. I won't get into it, but about why I missed it. I'm just an idiot. But I want to thank them for doing it.
Record?
Yes, it is on the record.
It is now. It's
It is on the
recorded for
record.
posterity.
I know. And just want to say thank you to them. And want to remind everyone that there is a public forum this Thursday night, the 12th, at the Hale School at 7 p.m. on PFAS. The Board of Health, the Selectmen's Office, Town Administrator, has asked DEP, Representative Kate Hogan, the Department of Public Health, the Office of the State Fire Marshal, as well as local officials to attend and inform people about PFAS. If you don't know what PFAS is, please don't ask me to say the complicated chemical name for it, but it is a toxic chemical of unusual duration that is in groundwater, not everywhere, but in many places, frequently associated with fire retardant, but also with other common things like Teflon. It has been a common industrial additive for years, and at certain concentrations it can be harmful. It has been found at certain locations in town, as many people know, and people obviously have questions. If you have any questions about PFAS, if you just want to know more about it, please come to this public forum. It's great that we're getting all these state officials here to give the town of Stow some direct information. I believe the town administrator will mention this in his town administrator report. The town clerk asked me to mention that dog licenses are available. They are only $10 each. You bring the dog, we bring the license. And I want to wish happy birthday to Lou Halpern, former Stow TV official and all-around man about town, historical advocate, and we appreciate Lou. We just want to remark on his birthday. And I will now move to the meat of our agenda, and we have a few sets of minutes. And I believe we have minutes from our last meeting, do we not?
Yes, we do.
And the meeting before.
Last two meetings.
Do we have any comments on the minutes from December, I think it is 12th?
November 12th.
I'm sorry, November 12th.
I found one typo, I think, on the second page. Must be wishful thinking on Maureen's part that the tax rate would be 61 cents per thousand.
I found the same one.
It's 2061, I looked back at the notes.
Wishful thinking.
So there's a 2 missing on that.
2-0.
2-0.
Mr. Chairman,
I just want to see if Don has, if Tom has anything else.
That was all I,
Don?
I had a few, but I'm trying to get to it. On that same issue on tax classification hearing on line 2, Ms. Fox stipulated that tax rates, I believe she meant classification, was 1. The rate isn't 1. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it should read classification. On the promotion of John Butler, Bolter?
It should be Butler.
Butler. Now, line 2, after police academy, would it be perhaps more correct to say at the town's expense? Because that was what was stipulated. So it will read, he will send him to the police academy at the town's expense.
I don't think
No, he's paying, his contribution monetarily
Okay.
is he's paying for the academy.
We're paying him
We're
to,
paying him for
This time,
that
okay,
training
all right,
period.
okay.
So that's okay.
I stand corrected. Lower common, I think you have already mentioned it in your brief comments, but I think the minutes should reflect that the Lions Club is now taking ownership of this. Ms. Stams was before us as she was the originator of it. But if the amendment would be, take place on December 7, after the word permission.
I think I'm going to ask you, yours are more substantive, I'm going to ask you to give yours in writing to Maureen.
Okay.
And I have the luxury of looking at what you have here.
Okay.
Can you summarize them for the?
No, I will just make one other substantive one then tonight, perhaps. On the appointment of streets, superintendent of streets, which will be before us shortly. In the third line, Brian Hatch stated he was not interested in the position. I would suggest that we add the words "at this time." I think that was the way the comment was placed.
Okay.
And I will give the rest to Maureen separately, but they are not substantive.
I had just one motion at the bottom of page 3. It says further I move. It's
Yes.
copied from the motion. It should be Ms. Fresher moved.
That was one of mine too.
And Brian, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Maureen, I think you have my comments and Don and Tom's. So I had the I, and Tom had the catch about the rate.
Right.
Don will give you comments in writing. Do I have a motion on the minutes of November 12th as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the minutes of November 12th as amended. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that is unanimous. Or opposed, nay? Abstentions? Nothing. That's unanimous. And now, minutes from our last meeting of November 26th. I will start on my right, but I will tell you I didn't have anything on this one.
I was
Either-
good.
That was good.
Tom?
One, page 2 at the bottom, respectfully submitted, should read Courtney Fresher, clerk.
Oh, are these yours? Yes, they must be. Or did
Actually,
one
they're not. We
What?
took the minutes from the recording.
from the video? Okay, great.
I saw you assiduously taking,
So
you
the,
I was
get
taking-
credit
so
for it.
we're all
We're all
set.
set, thank you.
Brian?
I'm going to abstain.
Yes, okay. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 26th as written?
As, so moved.
Second,
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of November 26th as written. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and abstentions.
Right here.
401. Okay, thank you very much. Correspondence, I don't know if you had a chance to look at, correspondence is largely a few more applications for the screening committee. Obviously, that'll be taken up at a later meeting. Does anybody have anything in correspondence that they want to suggest for a future agenda? Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, one of the things I did is I came across the letter from DCHD about our affordable housing inventory.
Okay,
And one of the things I did notice is that in 2025, the 50 units at Plantation are due to come off. So we should probably, sometime in the next few months, probably have an update from SMART on what they might be doing to try to keep them on our inventory.
yeah, I think an update from SMOT in general is probably a pretty good idea. What do you think? Working around in SMOT?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Maureen, could we, for one of the meetings in January,
Sure.
try to get SMOT in? And Ms. Fraser, could I trust you to tell Mike that we're talking about this, and you can figure out the 2 dates, and whichever one works best for him. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Anything else? Correspondence? All right. So, there's a new guy in town. Before we get to the new guy, want to say something to Brian Hatch. Brian, why don't you come on up? Yeah, I know. You don't want to do this.
Hi, my name's Don Knowles. Nice to meet you. Who are you again?
Nice to meet you, thank you.
I think we just wanted to express our appreciation for you to step up for a considerable period of time and running the department. You know, that's, when you're the assistant or the deputy of any department, I guess it goes without saying that that can be expected, but nonetheless, when it happens, it is typically disruptive. It's a lot of work. Occasionally, you start to appreciate what you're, what the old guy was doing a little bit better. But it is a lot of work, and we just wanted to say thank you.
I appreciate that, and thank you for the recognition. And if I could just say publicly, I'd like to thank the crew that we have, Brian, Brent, Ben, Chris, Derek, and Nico, and Jonathan, a new hire. They've not only been instrumental in my success, but also the department's success. Plus all the other heads of the departments that have been very supportive. Bill, you as well, have been very supportive, and the board, so thank you.
Brian?
Just briefly, about, I would say, 4 or 5 months ago, you put some items on Municipid.
Yes.
And we had to approve that retroactively.
Right.
And I thought at the time it was a great idea. And I sent an email to you saying, hey, would love to hear back on how that worked out.
Sure.
I got some chaff from people on this board.
You did?
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, I
I
remember.
can't imagine such
Yeah, I
a...
can't even.
Yeah, I can't
We'll
see
have
that
to,
happening.
we'll have to review the minutes.
Well, no, I think it was online, but the point here is, I can understand their lack of confidence in me, but not their lack of confidence in you. And on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, you sent us around an email saying that you had gotten some good prices for the items that you put on bid. You did get back to us, and I think it's as I said, I thought it was an ingenious idea, and it worked out well. I'm sure you're going to be a great help to the new superintendent. And thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Tom?
Well, I've had a number of conversations with Brian over the last month since he's taken over. You know, I've also known him for quite a while and know what a hard worker he is. But
Can you say that a little bit louder?
who are you
I don't know if
I
Bill
thought I
heard
was
you.
talking about somebody else. But yeah, you know, over the summer I had a chance to see a couple things, how he worked with the guys more than I had in the past and things like that. And you know, he just seemed to have done a great job stepping up and you know, falling into the shoes. So it's much appreciated. And you know, one of the last conversations I had before Steve came on is that, you know, what Brian was saying is he really appreciates what a good crew that he has. And we're very lucky to have a crew like that, and we're lucky to have Brian.
They're a good bunch of guys.
So,
Can't do it without them.
John?
Just briefly, just to add on, I sound like Johnny One Note over the years that I've been on the board, and before that, for 30-some years. Going back to, I came to town when John Mackey was the big dog.
Sure.
And everybody since then and the crew has been amazing. I said, with all due respect to this gentleman being squeezing the nickel till you know what, everybody in that department has made more out of nothing or next to nothing than anybody I've ever seen. I hope the gentleman sitting behind you takes note that this is the way you run the department.
I believe he already has taken
Thank you.
note of what we have for guys, and I will make sure that I pass along the board's sentiments to them as well.
And I think Bill wants to say something. I just want to add one thing on a more personal note. I didn't really know you before you took over.
Always try to stay under the radar.
I told you he was a smart guy.
I can appreciate that. But I have to say, I enjoyed getting to know you. You, as interim superintendent, you kind of stepped into a more public role. We sat on a couple of committees together a few minutes. I gotta say, you're good at it. I don't know if you know you're good at it, if you appreciate it, but you're good at it. Just want to tell you.
Try to say that at home, it doesn't go over too well. But thank you. It's
Okay.
very much appreciated. It means a lot to me. It really, truly does. So to have the support of all of you and the other people in this town, it's been an enjoyable work experience. I've enjoyed working for this town. There's a lot of great people in this town. You know, if not, I probably wouldn't have spent the last 23 years. So thank you to all of your support. I just can't thank you guys enough, everybody.
Good. And
I really truly appreciate the accolades, and I'm not one that likes to be in the public eye and take those accolades, but it does mean a lot to me.
Well, I think you're going to have to suffer through it for just a few more minutes,
Few
because
more
I think
minutes.
Mr. Wrigley wants to add something.
Brian, my 28 years here, there's a continuation of a culture of self-reliance that's epitomized in Stow. Many small towns have it to a degree, but Stow Highway, and this goes back before my time, and his predecessor for Michael, and then before that, John Mackey, we're creatures of habit, and we get into good habits. And in my opinion, this is a department that has never complained about lack of resources as to why they couldn't or wouldn't do something. And in some communities, you talk about self-help departments where no one's stepping up to the plate, volunteering and saying we can do what the others have refused to do. Stow Highway has always been the place that everybody turned to in the event that they couldn't find somebody else to assist. And I'm certain there may have been some decline of the invitations, but I don't remember any of them. And every time that someone really needed the help, Stow Highway has stepped up, and that's not as common an occurrence as it once was. And that's completely due to the people and the quality and the character that have served in Stow Highway. And our culture today, however, you find it more difficult to find that. And so we have some departments with folks like Brian with 20 to 30 years experience, and they still carry that cultural can-do attitude. And I want to say, personally and professionally, that every time I see it, I'm thankful for it, because it's just not there as in abundance as it was. But
Yeah.
it still is in more abundance in that department than many other folks just don't see it.
I've been, to reiterate what Tom said, you're gonna make me cry. We have a good bunch of guys, and they care. You know, they care about what they do in the community, and we've been very lucky over my career to have that. So I just, again, can't say enough about them as well.
And that's, in Stow, it's, again, the can-do attitude. We have administrative offices, and I'm speaking more here if you need physical, something moved, something corrected, repaired, and the rest of it. But we have a number of departments where if you need something done administratively, management, the same attitude. So if you can secure and protect that attitude over time with new hires, work hard to do it, because it's not as common as it once was.
Thank you.
But we have a lot of folks who step up.
And thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And I think we should probably say hello to the new guy. Steve, why don't you come up too?
How do you do?
Don't get used to this. This doesn't happen every time you show up here.
Meaning the next time, don't expect it. You get one.
Steve, I just want to give you a chance to say hi to members of the board who you haven't met already. Brian, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.
So you had a pretty calm week. You just sort of, you know,
Baptism by snow and ice.
how. So your first day was Monday.
Sunday.
Actually.
Sunday.
I called on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't expecting it.
Technically, wasn't even on payroll yet, but you know. So how much sleep did you get in your first 48 hours on the job?
Going home and trying to get the guys a break with that lull that we had. I think going home and then thinking about everything is the first storm. As the guy said, you came in and we normally don't have all the breakdowns we had. I had quite a few breakdowns and was ready to break out the road grader to plow roads.
I glanced at the police report that, is public information, all the accidents and everything else, and Monday and Tuesday were very busy. And I thought of you. And there were things happening at a lot of, oh this, oh that. So just want to say thanks for that. Welcome aboard. Now you came from
I came from Needham.
Needham. So tell people a little bit about what your experience is and
I
what you're
was
gonna bring here.
the assistant superintendent of capital construction. So I dealt with everything from stormwater management, water, sewer, drain, building sewage pump stations, downtown streetscape, traffic light type stuff, everything that you guys are now getting into with the streetscape and
Right.
the complete streets and all that, so.
Yep.
I was heavily involved with the different departments making all that happen.
Great. Questions from members of the board?
Do you know how many streetlights we have in Stow? I think it's 34. Maybe I stand corrected, but it's something like that. Just as a personal privilege, I said, this gentleman, you're in good hands. He was a chief bosun mate. Bosun mates make the world of naval and particularly Coast Guard world go around. And he's over 6 feet tall, so we don't have to get into that private joke. I'm so glad to see you coming aboard. I think your background will fit wonderfully here, and you're going to be a credit to this town.
My motto is adapt, improvise, overcome.
And
Like that.
and we share another motto. Semper
Semper
Paratus.
So I have an increasingly full room. I think a lot of people here for a poll hearing, so I may have to cut this a little bit short. But we just wanted to say hello and welcome aboard. Any final words from any other members of the board?
You know, I've already had probably a half-hour conversation with Steve. I gave him a call after it stopped snowing to, welcome him aboard and all that stuff. And, it's, I think he's going to be a great fit. I was on the group that interviewed him to begin with. And, we were very impressed with him at the time. And, I think he's going to be a great fit for the town. So,
Good.
welcome aboard, Steve. And get ready for round 3, right? Tonight.
Starts tonight at 3 o'clock.
Looks like it's going to be light.
It's still, the temperature's dropping.
Yeah.
It means
Ice.
chance of black ice
Right.
and all that fun stuff, so. The guys are ready. You've got a good crew. They know what they're supposed to do.
Right. Steve, thank you. Welcome aboard. Look forward to working with you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thank you. Didn't mean to jump line.
All right, and it is safely after 7:15, the time appointed for a utility pole location hearing. Among the duties, the statutory duties the Board of Selectmen has is to conduct public hearings and vote on the location of utility poles. And I take it from this card that Maureen has given me that we do have somebody from Hudson Light Power here.
Sir,
Chris, right?
Yep.
And I've seen you before, right?
not here.
No, not here?
Mr. Chair, point of process.
Yes, Mr. Burke.
As an abutter, I would like the chair to recognize my recusal from deliberations on this matter, and I'll take a seat with my neighbors and friends in the audience.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
If you're here for this hearing, we'll have you sign in on the sheet as it comes around, please.
There's your motion.
So I have to go through a couple of procedural things. We will now officially open the hearing on the location of a utility pole at Birch Hill Road and Whitman Street. A notice of hearing was posted on November 22nd, 2019, and advertised in the Stow Bolton Independent on November 27th, 2019, reading in substance as follows. Notice is hereby given in accordance with MGL Chapter 166, Section 22, that the Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing regarding pole locations request by Hudson Light Power Department to locate utility poles as follows. Birch Hill Road and Whitman Street, Stow. install one new 40-foot Class 2 wooden utility pole with municipal space approximately 65 feet southeast of existing pole number 13 Whitman Street. This pole shall be numbered pole 13-1 Birch Hill Road. Pole location to be staked by the Hudson Light and Power Department. And notice was given, the public hearing would be held tonight at 7:15 p.m. here at Town Building. I am not going to read the list of abutters, but certified mail, they were notified by certified mail, and we are passing around an attendance list right now. And I will start off by introducing Chris, which I think we've already sort of done. Let him explain the gist of what is being proposed. I'll then take questions and comments from board members, and then I'll take questions and comments from members of the public. And when we're done with that, I'll close the hearing. Okay? Chris, I turn it over to you.
All right. Should I approach?
Yeah.
You can do whatever you need to do.
All right.
If you're going to show us something,
We do this.
Okay.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
If you're going to show us something, make an effort to also show the people behind you.
Absolutely. So what we have here currently, we feed the Birch Hill neighborhood from a utility pole on Whitman Street, pole number 13. As you can see here, almost directly across from the Birch Hill entrance. Birch Hill currently is one of the
There's
only...
another copy on the wall over there.
Yeah, there's copies on either side. Birch Hill is currently one of the only neighborhoods on our system that has a non-redundant feed. So there is one line which goes underground from this pole 13. It feeds underground up to the first transformer, which is out of sight on this picture. We would like to put a utility pole here on the corner shown in the red, as you guys can see. And what we would like to do is intercept the pipe that crosses Whitman Street and make this the new riser pole for Birch Hill. We also have a spare conduit, which is in this general area. We'll have to do a little bit of excavation within, a small area to find the end of that pipe. We know roughly where it is, and then we'd like to add a second feed. So we would have redundancy for the neighborhood, and obviously puts the 28 customers on Birch Hill at lesser risk of a long outage in case of underground failure.
So other than the redundancy, what is the additional service utility? Is the signal any stronger? I doubt that. Is it just the fear of breakage occurring somewhere?
Yes, it's the fear of a failure, especially with, in the bad weather, with winter upon us now. This neighborhood is on the older side. If I recall, I'm sure the audience knows better than I do, but I think the neighborhood was built in the 80s, 70s?
Mid-70s.
Okay, so the transformers and the infrastructure I know is dated around 81. So it's on the older side. And we do, obviously, we try to go through systematically and upgrade based on age and obviously redundancy. And this meets both criteria.
But the pole, I'm just trying to understand, the pole obviously doesn't increase or decrease the age of the transformer.
No, but we will go through the neighborhood.
And replace equipment. This is
Right, as needed. This is the biggest risk for the entire neighborhood. It has the biggest impact.
all right.
So if that wire were to fail, it could be a pretty lengthy outage.
Show
in
me
order to refeed it.
Show me where the nearest driveways are, if you know.
The nearest driveway, I believe, on Birch Hill.
Either. I
Okay,
guess.
so the nearest driveway would be right across the street,
Okay.
Whitman. You can see my line, 62 feet.
Yep.
It's pretty much directly across from that Whitman Street.
And on
I
Birch.
believe the next closest would be south. It would be south on Whitman. It would be this one on the corner of Birch Hill and Whitman. I don't know the number.
And this way,
And
I'm-
then up here on the left.
okay.
So it would be northeast, would be the third closest driveway.
Up here on the north east, Do you know where the nearest driveway is there?
I don't,
Okay.
I can't picture it off the top of my head.
Okay.
That's the Habercorns.
Okay, questions from members of the board? Tom?
I take it you're running it across it. Is the current line under the street?
Yes, I apologize. So we're proposing to run an aerial cable from
Right.
pole 13 to pole 13-1. From there, it would go underground, just like it is now.
And will it be in a separate conduit from the existing conduit?
I'm sorry,
The-
from
When you you said that you had a spare conduit that would run
Yes.
up there. So what does that do? Keep it a totally separate line? So like if
Exactly.
one
Yep.
line catches fire, it's not gonna fry the other one?
Exactly. So we currently have a conduit that crosses Whitman Street.
Mm-hmm,
That has the active line in it.
right.
And we also have a spare conduit which dead ends around this, or in this corner. It does not cross Whitman Street.
And the reason you're not running a separate line through the same conduit is because it could burn up the other line, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's, and it's probably a lot less expensive to not have to dig up the road and,
Right. And also, we've changed the way we do things since this neighborhood was built. So for instance, pole 13 is a mainline pole. It's on the main line. If this neighborhood were to be constructed today, this is exactly how we would do it. That's why we're proposing to put the riser pole across the street off of the main line, dedicated strictly for the Birch Hill feeders.
and that's it. Everything else in the neighborhood is underground though, right?
Correct. And it will remain underground.
Right.
Yep,
Right.
and then those upgrades will take place as necessary.
And you're not proposing that this overhead line is a redundant line, it will be the new line
This overhead will be the new line
to that
to the
point?
feeder,
Right.
I'm sorry, to the riser pole.
And I guess I'm just having a hard, do I take it that the assumption is that an underground line is more vulnerable, perhaps to water?
Yes, so the age obviously is a big factor here because of water in the conduit and corrosion.
Okay. Why not replace the underground line with a new underground line?
We would still have just a single line. We would not have redundancy if we were to replace it.
But with the overhead, you're not going to have redundancy from this point to that point, right?
Correct, but overhead is a much quicker repair. So if a branch were to take this out, or a large vehicle, that would be a really quick repair for us, just like the adjacent line here. You know what I mean?
So fair to say your position is that an overhead line is safer or at least more efficient than a new underground line? I can understand the advantage over an old underground line.
Right. Well, we're simply extending the point at which we feed the riser pole. This new proposed overhead line is at no greater risk than how it is now, currently. It's overhead to the existing riser pole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
The redundancy comes in underground, and that's what we're trying to fix here.
You're proposing a height here across the street of 12 feet?
It would be the same as the main line. I don't currently know the height. It would be higher than 12 feet.
So I could be wrong. I thought I saw in the materials 12 feet.
I think that was, my reading was that was the lowest.
I think it's a minimum. That's the code requirement. The line would
And-
actually be higher than that.
And not less than?
Correct.
Not less than 8, and not less than 12 feet from the ground elsewhere, elsewhere.
Correct. But this would be a 40-foot utility pole, and we would hit, give or take, let's say there's 5 to 6 feet in the ground, and we would be probably 5 feet down from the top,
If I'm
4 to
correct.
5 feet.
If I'm correct, I think usually the lower lines are cable and telephone and things
Correct.
like that, and they keep the electric up as high as they can.
Correct.
So it sounds like as a practical matter, this would be more like 25 to 30 feet.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
More questions from members of the board?
No, sir.
One more question. I believe that, Maureen, did Steve Nadeau send you anything on?
Brian Hatch did.
Oh, Brian
send
did?
it to me.
It just so happens,
Take your choice.
So, do you guys have any objections or problems with the placement of the pole?
No, it falls within the construction easement that's currently there now. It won't impede us at all whatsoever, anything that we need to do, so the highway department didn't have any issues with the placement.
Ms. Birch, anything?
No questions.
Okay, I'll take questions from the public. Oh, no one's rushing, everybody's shy. Come on, somebody wants to be the first?
Go ahead.
No, it should be a non-selected. Chris, it should be you. Say your name and your address, please.
My name is Christina Weil, and I live at 91 Whitman Street, so that is my driveway. I will look out past my Zen and Rose Gardens to the new pole
So when you say that is my driveway, you mean the one,
that looks
on-
directly across from the pole.
right, so the one on the west side of Birch, of Whitman Street.
Okay. And I just think it would be an eyesore. It feels like from an aesthetic standpoint, it would be moving backward. We know buried is safer, and if we need to upgrade conduit hardware, so be it. You can put an insulator, I would imagine, inside a new conduit. You wouldn't have to worry about trees or ice if it were buried. And I think it would be more in keeping with the rural character of our town.
Is he correct, Chris, that, I mean, I've been up Whitman Street a million times, I don't look at the utility poles, that they're overhead going parallel to the road?
They already are.
Okay.
So this would just add more junk. I was waiting at the light at the one lane bridge we have going now, and looking at just all the poles and wires, and it's a rat's nest, and it's just a shame to see that kind of thing proliferating, in my view. My husband would love to echo my sentiment, but he's in Dubai at the moment.
Further comment, thank you. Mr. Burke.
Could we get a price differential between laying a new conduit or refurbishing the existing conduit and putting up a pole? And also, that would include disruption to traffic for how long while that road was being ripped up?
So, Mr. Burke, you're setting a poor example. Brian Burke, 125 Birchville Road, right?
You're 100% right. And speaking strictly as an individual, not as an elected official.
Can you address the question, Chris?
I cannot give you a price differential at the moment. I'd be happy to take this back to our engineering department. However, I would advise that the engineering and Hudson Light Power as a whole would definitely advise against keeping the riser here on the main line. We've changed that specifically due to accidents. You know, if a car comes along and takes this pole out, it is much more timely and much more costly to get, number one, all of that repaired and get the neighborhood back up and running. That's why, like I said, if this development were to be constructed today, we would absolutely not rise on that mainline pole. So that would be my advice, but I would be happy to bring it back and run that by the team.
Further questions? Well, let me see if there's anybody else who hasn't spoken. Anybody else? Nothing. Ms. Weil.
I too would be interested in seeing the cost differential. I understand that Verizon owns the pole, and I just would, hope that it's not a matter of not being able to play in the sandbox well together. or even price gouging on the part of Verizon in terms of sharing that pole. So I wouldn't want that to be a reason we do something unsightly.
Okay, speak to that.
Please.
I assure you, it's not a matter of not having a good relationship with Verizon. We have an excellent relationship with Verizon and their teams that do construct poles. We work closely with them in Stow and in Hudson. And as far as price gouging, again, we have contracted pricing and a very close relationship that I assure you neither of those are the reason for this. This is strictly Hudson Light Power trying to increase reliability for the Birch Hill customers. That's it.
Mr. Burke, you asked for price differentials between the overhead and the underground options, is that right?
Yes, and refurbishing the conduit and bringing it up to the, I don't know if it's existing code, but a more modern conduit with insulation. That was my question.
May we assume, Chris, that the overhead line is cheaper than laying an underground new conduit?
Absolutely. The overhead from pole 13 to the new proposed 13-1 would be less costly than digging up the road and installing a new conduit and pulling in 2 new lines. Absolutely.
May we assume that that is part of the motivation for doing it overhead, though perhaps not all of it?
I would say, I mean, obviously there are many factors that would play a very, very small role, I assure you. Like I said, number one is rising on this pole contradicts our current practice. That's first and foremost. Like I said, if we were to construct this neighborhood and the developer or owner were to request rising over here, we would simply say no. That's not our current practice.
Okay.
So that is one of the main reasons.
Questions from anyone other than Ms. Weil? I know Ms. Weil has a, oh, this gentleman over here, yes. State your name and your address, please.
My name is Amrit Badwai. I live at 120 Birch Road. And my wife Daksha. We live across Miss Burn.
We won't hold that against you, so.
So many times storms came and severe storms, frozen rain few years ago, and on the Whitman line, so many branches were on the electric line, and for few days the power was down. So it is well known that when the wires are running and the trees are there, and we are full of trees in the Stow, the tree limbs knock down the power. So thinking that 40 years ago when Birch was developed, they had a great site, they put the electrical power underground, and whenever power went other places, but we always had the power. Now putting a overhead line, we are going backwards. Technology goes forward. Everybody supports that. And this way putting a pole, we are going backwards. So underground power is more reliable than the power on the electrical lines. Everybody knows that.
Let's let him respond to that. So I think this may be the third time, if you include me, Ms. Weil, and this gentleman, that this trade-off in safety is, let's say, counterintuitive. So could you try to explain it again?
Yes, I fully understand. I fully understand. However, I would argue that 2 underground lines serving the neighborhood is more reliable than currently 1 underground line. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. Currently, the riser pole is fed overhead with 1 underground cable feeding the neighborhood. We're proposing to keep the new riser pole fed overhead now with 2 parallel lines serving the neighborhood.
But for
I
the
understand.
crossing of Whitman Street, you're not proposing 2 redundant lines, you're proposing 1, and essentially you're proposing to move it from underground to above ground.
Correct.
So address why that has safety benefits, if it does.
Yeah, our argument was not about safety. I'm not arguing one is more safe than the other.
Well, safety, and by safety, I'm using that broadly, safe, or easy to repair. What's the advantage? What's the utility?
Much quicker repair, much quicker repair. A branch or a truck could rip that line down and our guys could have it back up in a matter of, minutes, I would say, when on site. As opposed to one line underground, you throw in weather, you're gonna have a longer outage, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I had a question in the back.
Hi, Linda Stokes, 15 Robert Road. I would like to know the failure rates of the above ground versus the below ground rates. And I also have a question, if we do not approve putting in an above ground, will nothing be done?
I can't speak to that at the moment. We will absolutely upgrade the underground line that is there. I cannot say when, and when we do. Let's say, for example, if this is denied, and we're gonna upgrade the underground line that is currently there, the customers on Birch Hill will experience an outage while that takes place. As opposed to doing it this way, we would be able to keep their service while we upgrade and do our cutover and all that stuff.
So I feel, Mr. Hawks, did you have?
Yeah, I didn't ask a question before, if I might. How long would it take you if it were denied and you want to get your redundancy underground, given the time, condition, asphalt plants it down, digging it up? How long would it take you if you were to start tomorrow to get it finished underground?
Well, I feel confident in saying we wouldn't do it in this inclement weather. We would definitely wait for the next weather for a quicker.
Would that be spring or just another break in the weather?
We would have to go back to the drawing board and see where this would fall in our projects and where we could line it up. But I would say one of the shoulder months would be best, spring or fall, instead of dead of the summer or dead of the
So if you go ahead with the overhead, when would you start optimally?
Again, I would have to speak to the team, but we would most likely try to coordinate getting the pole set and doing some of this minor excavating very soon, before the ground has a hard freeze.
So within a couple of weeks, perhaps?
Yes.
You might have the new line redundancy in place if you go that route as you propose.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nothing would prevent you from having the redundancy if you put in an underground conduit across Whitman Street or under Whitman Street, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
You're talking about underground redundancy from this point.
Correct.
Nothing would prevent you from having that if you replace this proposed overhead with a new underground.
You're saying if we took this dead-ended pipe and we extended it across Whitman to this
Yes.
existing riser? Again, it's something we most likely would not pursue.
Would not pursue any of this?
We would definitely upgrade the single line that's there at some point.
Okay.
100%. We would do that. I don't know, because that would not involve excavating the road. We would simply shut it down. We would pull the cable out of the existing conduit, and we would pull in new cable, make all the terminations, and do everything that we need to do. But we would not dig up the road and add in a second conduit under the road.
I have several generations of highway superintendent or acting superintendent sitting in front of me, including Mr. Fletcher. I'm wondering if any of you feels qualified to offer any kind of an opinion on the reasonableness of this substitution of an existing underground conduit for an overhead, the added utility, things like that. Steve, you look like you have something to say.
I can speak one, Needham is currently looking at putting like Weston underground. It's about $2 million a mile for each utility company to place underground with redundancy. His engineers most likely will come back to the town if they do a single and they still want a double. I understand where they're coming from because Eversource has a similar policy and Needham residents would argue the same thing. When a car or a truck takes out that pole, it's easy to reset the pole and hook everybody back up, but when it's only got one riser off the pole to the neighborhood, if they bring a second one to the same pole, it's no good, because what they're saying is, once you crush that conduit and destroy it, they have to go all the way back down the street, get a contractor in that digs, re-put it all the way back up to the pole, so instead of being a 4-hour outage for the neighborhood, it could be 2 or 3 days, because the pole is easy to reset. But to do the underground work at the bottom of the pole with all the upsweeps, if both are there, and we just did a bridge where we did this with Eversource, that they did 2 different poles just for that fact, for redundancy, so Newton and Needham didn't lose power on major feeds. So if somebody with a big tractor trailer truck takes it out making a delivery, he would most likely come back with his engineering firm to say, I need to go down Whitman Road to a second pole either side because that's at an intersection. So that's some of the things that when the engineers look at stuff, they're looking for redundancy, not just for the single line, it's that time that it takes to rebuild the underground at that one pole. So if you snap that off low and he has to go back and dig, and it's the middle of winter in January where the ground is frozen 3 feet down, they're either have to bring in diesel generators that the neighborhood's not gonna like to feed that neighborhood, which Eversource has done. Needham had a couple of underground, just like this, underground, that the cables failed. They'd never do that type of design today.
Is an underground conduit less likely to fail in the first place than an overhead?
I would say the conduit itself, no. The wires down the road with being overloaded, and because people add stuff down the road, the overheating of the line can happen. It happens in the city all the time. But I think where I think he's trying to come from with the redundancy is the downtime with that one conduit coming across the street. If it gets taken out, it's not a speedy repair. Where
Okay.
resetting the pole with that riser, by moving the riser to the other side, if that other line goes down, they're still fed, it's a quick fix when the other pole's down. They can come back at a later date, fix the second run down the street, so if God forbid that ever happens again, they can, if the other pole gets taken out.
Okay.
The only other choice they'd probably have is to come back to you later if it's denied, and go 1 pole north or 1 pole south on Whitman.
Okay, I want to finish with the public comment. Do I have any comments from anyone who has not already spoken? I do not. I will take 2, hopefully brief comments from the 2 people who have spoken, who want to speak again. And then I think we'll go back to the board. Ms.
This
Weil.
is related to something that you just said, sir, and something that Chris has also said. The pole is protected by a rock wall. So we're not going to have a truck come and take out the pole because it's protected by the rock wall in front of our house. That's just.
I don't know if
very
that's necessarily true. I see
And I
you.
also, yeah, it is true.
Well, I see you gentlemen bristling a little bit.
Yeah, I was on the call department for 8 years. If it can happen, it will.
Well, okay,
It-
so I'm not
it-
about
it could happen.
impossibility. I do have one other request for information. I'd like to see some historical data showing outages on Birch Hill that were not also experienced on Whitman Street. Because in my experience, the outages that happened on Birch Hill also involved the entire line of Whitman Street.
Also, I want to see historic data, how many trucks came and hit the pole that currently we have?
Yeah, 0. I've
Zero.
been here 25
And all
years.
these years, 0.
I need to maintain a little bit of order. Do I have any other comments before I close the public hearing? I will have him address that last question. I don't. I'm going to declare the public hearing. Well, I need a motion and a vote.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right. Chris, can you address that last question about data about outages on Whitman but not Birch Hill, or Birch Hill and not Whitman?
Yeah, I don't have all of the data in front of me. However, I can speak in my time, almost 9 years with the light department. I do know that we have had two of the underground lines. If you can imagine, it's hard to explain without having the full picture. Everybody knows Birch Hill is a loop. We have one line feeding up, and then from that point it goes fully around the circle. Between each transformer is a section of cable, and most of that infrastructure is original. And like I said, in my time, we have had 2 sections of, I believe, the 9 sections total that have failed underground, and we've had to replace them. And again, this is partially why we want to tackle this or this redundancy piece. It has been very timely to get that old cable out of the conduit and replace it with new cable and make the terminations and get everything back up and running. So that's what I have to say about the underground infrastructure at Birch Hill. We do have a plan to tackle those remaining sections at a later date. However, they're not as critical, because once we have this redundancy, we have a full loop back to the riser pole. If any one section fails, we can isolate it and we can feed from both sides to minimize any downtime for the customers and isolate that failed cable while we replace it. If that happens down here, we don't have that capability, and everybody's going to experience that outage.
All right. Thank you. Chris,
You're welcome.
you can go back to there if you'd like. We're going to discuss.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I've probably got some more questions for
But then don't go anywhere.
Okay.
You know, one of the things I was going to say is probably for clarification. One, it sounds like the current wiring there is fairly old, likely to fail. Don't know when it's going to, but you've already had multiple failures in there, and that's part of the reason that you're trying to do this.
Correct.
You can't just go in and rip out all the wires
No.
without it shutting everybody down for an extended period of time. I don't know, could you guess on how long that might be if you don't have the redundant wire that you're asking for?
It's honestly, it's this is a bad answer, but it's really tough to say depending on the amount of water and corrosion in each conduit and the condition of the wire. Sometimes we pull wire out and it comes out nice and easy. Other times we've had wire hung up and we have to excavate, and we find that the pipe is separated and shifted, and you know, in that case we have to run a new conduit.
But at that point, you've got to shut down the whole neighborhood the way it is right now, because you can't have juice flowing in from one direction or another.
If that were to happen in this first section, yes, that is correct. We would have to shut everyone down.
And you wouldn't know how long that would take, you know. And I suppose that's where I'm getting on some of this, is that part of the reason you're doing this is because it is so old. Are you also planning on replacing the wire that's in the conduit under the road at some point? You had said you might do that?
We would eliminate it. We would completely eliminate that. So we would pull it out. We would cap the conduit on either side, and that would be eliminated.
It's not redundant under the road.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
But the thing is, I had thought that you were planning on putting up one wire and then having, you know, running the other one still under the road. At least that's the way I...
The one under the road would remain in service until the overhead is livened up and tied in with the spare conduit. At that point, we would feed the neighborhood overhead and through the new conduit, through the new feed in the spare conduit, and then we would go and for lack of a better term, cut out the wire under the ground, and we would bring it up this pole, giving us that redundancy.
Just
What, are you finished, Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, the only other thing is, I also think that if they were forced to go completely under the road for redundancy, I also think at that point, the highway department would have something more to say about that also, considering digging up the roads. So, but at this point, I don't think that that's, you know, if that becomes the plan, I think they'll probably want to weigh in more.
All right. Ms. Frazier?
I just have a comment. I've been in Stow for 22 years, and my experience of Hudson Light Power service is exemplary. I know that other folks that I know that have other service, other electric service, which is a larger company and not a small municipal company such as theirs, have very long outages. And my experience has been that outages on my street have been dealt with speedily, and it seems to me that this company is requesting a proactive change to the infrastructure in order to maintain a speedy and in this case even redundancy in the service for the neighborhood, and that they have your best interests at heart. And that's it.
Mr. Hawks?
Just slight clarification of Mr. Ryan's last question. You're talking about capping it. You're really just talking about abandoning, functionally abandoning the conduit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's all I wanted to
All
clarify.
right. Now I think we're done.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My feelings are similar to Ms. Frazier's, but I think I would add that their concerns about their feeling that it's easier to service when it's overhead makes perfect sense to me. I was trying to get at whether underground is so much less likely to experience failure in the first place, that added ease of service is irrelevant or is overcome. I didn't hear that. And I did hear implicitly or explicitly that in fact they have had service outages there and they have had to pull the underground wires out. So I know that it happens, though I don't think I have enough information to know how frequently. My main concern entering this evening was the height of the wires. I'm always concerned about that, as well as sight distance of the poles within driveways. My concerns on both of those fronts have been allayed. So I feel like I'm ready for a vote. Mr. Hawks?
I think just comment on what I've heard, because I came in with open mind on this. Number one, building on Ms. Fresher's comment, they are recommending this in much the same way as we rely on experts in other areas to advise us on what is best practice. That would lead me in the direction of approving this. Number two, and perhaps more important, I was unclear when you talk about taking out a pole, thereby damaging the conduit 3 feet deep in the ground, frozen, if I heard some of the comments correctly. So it isn't just that the cable fails in the conduit. You snap a pole, you could thereby damage irreparably the conduit, the cable in the conduit. I think for those two reasons, I am in favor of approving this.
All right, do I have a motion or further? I mean, there'll be some discussion after the motion is made.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve and sign the application by Hudson Light Power to install a new pole on Birch Hill Road and Whitman Street, as indicated in the order for sole pole locations received by the Selectmen's office November 21st, 2019.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to approve and sign the pole location documents that Hudson Light Power supplied us with this evening. Any further discussion? Mr. Ryan, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to say, you know, it's, I think you guys have said it all. The Hudson Light Power has been very good. Redundancy is a good thing. And it's, while some people may like to see it stay underground, I think this is probably a cost-effective way to make sure that the people on Birch Hill keep their power.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. I'm sorry, the hearing's closed.
I need to ask one question. Now that you've voted for, can it be moved 40 feet to the left?
So first of all, when I say the
Stare at
hearing's
it.
closed and I haven't recognized you, you don't speak. As a courtesy, though, and that goes for everyone, I will allow the question. What was the question, Chris?
So now that you voted for it, is there any way it can be located one way or the other so it doesn't become such an eyesore? It's actually much more likely to be hit in their recommended.
So I think that's a
location.
question that should take up directly with Hudson Light and Power at this point.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for your participation this evening. All right, moving on. We are
We missed
pleased
you.
to have you back.
We missed your smiling face.
All right, next is the proposed, well, steps to be taken in connection with the acquisition of rights-of-way in connection with the Box Hill Mill Bridge. Do I,
That document we signed.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's,
Signed.
Put it here with
I have it here.
excuse us, we're going to take a moment and sign this.
And we'll go
Pole
to
location,
certified tomorrow. We just need Courtney signs one page
Yeah.
and Russ signed the other.
I know it's
So
in
if you
here.
need it.
I know it's in here.
Looking
probably-
for the,
Here we go.
one of these?
We've got this one and then the next page. We've got
We said it.
clerk and then, I think there's one for the whole, for everything. Yeah.
All right, want to use this one? So you sign there, and then we all sign there.
Yep.
Can I send this around while we start taking up the next item? Okay. All right. Let's order, please. Let's keep going. And he had to go?
He was here a minute ago.
So I will postpone this item, but I don't want to postpone it very long. Okay, I have people here, I think, for this item, correct? I have people here for this item? Do I have people for this box mill? Yeah, okay, so I don't want to post, the town planner was going to present it as temporarily MIA.
You want me to run downstairs and see if he's downstairs?
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else we can?
Yeah, I'm sure there's something we can probably at least start. Let's take up the renewal of the liquor licenses for 2020.
Right.
We're here.
Let's not do that. Let's stick with the agenda
Probably
and go to the
fill
Box
this in,
Mill
right?
Hill Mill,
Certify that on
Box
December.
Mill Road Bridge. Jesse, do you want to
10th.
walk us through this? We all have a memorandum from you.
19
Yes.
at
I have some
8:10.
8:10.
supplemental things that I didn't attach that I think will just be helpful as we talk about this. I will explain the colors. This is a, bill.
Thank you.
Is this for the color printer or is this done by hand?
I did this the old-fashioned way. Yes.
You
There's
colored
a
it
couple extra copies.
with highlighter?
Yes.
It's a nice thing to do on a rainy day.
Yeah. It's a good morning coffee
Yeah.
thing, you know? And then I'm just gonna put a couple of these here if there's folks who need to be more oriented to what we're talking about or where we're talking about here. Okay. So I think Box Mill Bridge is probably fairly fresh in folks' minds. We just had a article pass at town meeting for $30,000 for appraisal and legal fees regarding this project. So I'll just kind of give you a brief overview again. Box Mill Bridge has been on the Transportation Improvement Program for MassDOT for several years now. It's scheduled for reconstruction in 2022. We have, multiple departments have been kind of working with Mass DOT as they develop their initial concept plans and kind of, work with the town to understanding what we would need and how the process would work. We've been doing that for a while. We now have 25% design plans for the bridge. So what I put in front of you, all colored, are their 25% right-of-way plans. The reason why we're here tonight is because Mass DOT needs some confirmation from the town that we are willing to provide fair market value for the right-of-way and the associated easements to get the project done. They just do not want to advance it to the 100% and find out that we're not really committed to it because it's a huge cost, obviously. We said, okay, we've just got this article passed at town meeting, but this will be a chance to explain the project specifically to the Board of Selectmen and potentially get that kind of committing vote. So what I did on the plan here is I basically took 3 colors here just to kind of show you what is involved in the project. And so what we're looking at is Box Mill Bridge. On the left side of the plan is Carver Hill. On the right side is Brookside Ave and the Burrell property. There's 2 abutters to this project. That is the Carver Hill Orchard and the Burrell family. Am I missing any? I think those are the 2.
Two affected landowners. There are other abutters, but.
So what you have on the plan here in blue are the areas that are would actually be new right-of-way for the town. We own the underlying right-of-way here, and that's why we're having this discussion. It's not like Gleasondale where the state owned it and we didn't have to deal with any of this. So the blue would be new right-of-way. And so what that is, the big chunk there on the curve, that's really saying that we have the ability to own the approach to the bridge, the new approach as you come from Carver Hill to the bridge. Then there's a couple of narrow strips on the it would be the west and east side of the bridge. And that's really to kind of allow for the new bridge abutments that they have to put in. So it just widens it slightly there. And then the other 2 colors, the orange and the yellow, are just the easements. So the permanent easements are in orange. Some of them are for installation of guardrails. Some are for utilities. The biggest one actually along the top of the image there is a utility easement where there, I believe, currently is an overhead wire. There is, or
It's being moved.
yes,
to
I'm
that
sorry,
side
it's
of
on the other
road.
side of the road. They're going to move it to the what would be the west side, and that's why that easement is needed there. And then there's a few other kind of small ones peppered throughout the project. Now the big chunk, the big yellow curve at the bottom, that is the temporary bridge. So in order to build the bridge, they're proposing to use a temporary span for a year or so while they're decommissioning and then rebuilding the new Box Mill Bridge. These temporary construction easements will be similar to the ones we've used in Lower Village. Basically, they expire after a certain amount of time or when the project is over. The expectation is that the land is brought back to its original condition when it's over. There's a few details around that here, given that there's some farmland and stuff there, which we've talked about with the state. But I did just a rough calculation just so you have some concept of how big this is and what we're talking about. The actual right-of-way, the blue area, is about 5,000 square feet, just under. The permanent easements are 8,243 square feet in total. And the temporary easements, the biggest, are 17,968 square feet. So we're not talking about acres. These are relatively small areas. Doesn't mean that they're not important to any butters or others, but so I don't know if that's Kathy, if you would add anything else.
I'll just add that kind of as part of our due diligence to get to this point, we have met with each of the property owners. We've met with the Lord family and we've met with the Burrells just to show them these 25% design plans, talk with them about the process that's involved. We're obligated to follow a federal right-of-way acquisition process, so we have certain information we have to give them, we have certain documentation that we have to do of all of the contacts with the property owners. We are obligated to, if either or both of the landowners are willing to donate the right-of-way and the easements, they can just do that. But if they want to be reimbursed, we are obligated to go through an appraisal process to figure out the fair market value and then make an offer to them of that fair market value. So that's why we had the article on the town meeting warrant, to get us the funds to do the appraisal work. I should add that in addition to those two property owners, there's a third interest holder here, and it's part of the reason that I'm involved, which is the conservation restriction that we just purchased from Carver Hill is jointly held by Stow Conservation Trust and by the Conservation Commission, and was funded by the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. There are small portions of that conservation restriction that will be affected by these takings. And so we are talking with the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. Stow Conservation Trust is involved in the conversations, and we will probably need to go through the Article 97 process to take those interests. And so Representative Hogan has also been advised, and we'll be talking with her about that.
Just let me ask one thing. When you say right-of-way takings, you're saying that, I'm understanding that to mean that after this is over, the town would basically own the fee interest. We would own that land, much as the town currently owns the first 15 or 20 feet of practically everyone in town's front yard.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay. And when in easements, obviously, we're saying the landowners would retain the fee interest, but the town would have a right-of-way to pass.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Or the power line would go over. Some of these are guardrail easements, drainage easements.
Okay. And our current fee interest is the white?
Yes.
Okay. And the blue is our existing, I guess, easement, but not fee interest. Is that right?
No.
So the blue
No.
is
The blue
actually
we don't own.
The blue we just don't
abutting
own.
property owner land that we would need to own as part of this update.
So we basically own up to the bridge and then it just stops.
That's right.
Oh, okay. It does, okay. Well, that sort of makes sense. That makes some sense. Here's the hard question. What exactly are you asking us to do tonight?
Well, I'm really here. You know, it would have been nice if Mass DOT would have, you know, done this as well. But what we know from Mass DOT is that they are looking for some commitment that we will provide fair market value if the landowners are asking for it. So if the appraisal comes back and says that each of these easements are going to cost X amount of dollars, that the town would be willing to say, yes, we'd be willing to provide them that amount of money for these easements to finish the project.
Understanding
the
that
project.
may take a town meeting vote.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
there would
they're
be
not
applications.
asking you to vote to take tonight,
Yes.
obviously, but that you're committed to seeing the process through.
Well, can we just have a motion that says we're committed to seeing the taking process through? I mean,
That you're willing to.
You don't have
I
any
think-
other authority.
Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it sound to anyone like we're committing money that we can't.
That you can't commit.
Right. But I think that they want to know that the town is committed to carrying out the takings that are needed.
Even if
to
it becomes-
Allow the bridge to happen.
So even if negotiations break down,
Correct.
they're interested in hearing that we're even willing to take the steps of going through an involuntary taking,
Correct.
Yes.
if necessary. And that I can
Which we
understand.
don't expect, but we
Right.
don't know that.
And that I can understand, and please don't anybody take this as a threat, it's just, this is all discussion. That I can understand, because they don't want to spend money on the design without knowing that we're committed at least to the process, but I don't want to sound like we're committing money we don't have.
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, I sketched out, the Board of Selectmen intends to take all steps within its, God, I can't even read this, within its power to obtain the right-of-ways necessary for the renovation of the Box Mill Bridge, including but not limited to initiating voluntary or involuntary eminent domain proceedings.
I think the one thing I think that sounds good. The one thing I may add in that's important, I think, for the state is that we would adhere to the federal acquisition standards process. And I think that really spells out, following that process spells out, I think, what you just read. I don't know if others would agree, but.
And you may want to say right-of-way and easements, to the extent that they do.
In accordance with federal, say it again?
The federal acquisition guideline, I think.
Questions from members of the board, and then I want to give interested members of the public, which presumably are the abutters, an opportunity to
Brian was
comment.
trying to get your attention a few minutes ago.
Mr. Burke? Mr. Burke?
I can wait, but I'm more comfortable with just that we're committed to going through the federal appraisal process. And could you explain what that involves? We hire an appraiser, and if the landowners or abutters don't agree with that, they hire their own appraisers. Is there some kind of arbitration,
And there could be a
mediation?
review appraiser involved as well. You
I'm
know,
sorry?
There could be a review appraiser involved as well. If the two appraisals don't match, then you have a third appraiser who tries to bridge that gap.
And that's pursuant to federal procedures.
Mhm. And there's also just a lot of procedural steps you have to go through with each of the landowners.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable committing to going through the process with the final determination as to whether the money should be expended, even if it's pursuant to an unfriendly appraisal. Then that would be something for town meeting to take up. But yes, I can see committing to the federal acquisition procedures. But do you really need anything more than that?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that that is an important thing to say and to show to MassDOT. I think obviously anything that we do in the, at the end is contingent upon town meeting. They recognize that. So yeah, I think that is sufficient.
So the Board of Selectmen intends to undertake the federal acquisition process with respect to the right-of-ways and easements necessary for the renovation of the Box Mill Bridge.
Mr. Chairman?
Well, just let me see if that's okay. And I want to hear from the...
Yeah. I wish I was able to get Mass DOT to provide us some further clarification, but that seems logical.
It may be
seems to be what they're asking for.
It may be as far as we're willing or can go.
Yeah.
Mr. Hawks, and I will get to members of the public.
Without being too flowery, beyond this point, we dare not go. We can't, obviously, and this is for the people that are not here tonight, in my understanding of municipal practice. Obviously, we cannot make any kind of a statement here tonight or a vote that binds a future board, even to what we are proposing as tonight's motion. So people should understand that.
We can make a statement of intent tonight and intent to
That's
undertake a process.
not my point.
Yeah.
By a vote tonight, we cannot bind a
Right.
future person sitting in any one of our chairs who would have to go through this process. But the state understands that. I'm not trying to educate the state. I'm just trying to clarify it in my own mind as to process.
Right.
So I'm just looking for validation as much as
It would be
anything.
my guess that any reasonable language we voted on this evening that expressed and implied your intentions would be
Right.
accepted by, they're not rookies at this.
Right.
They understand you don't have certain authority, the legislative body does, and even the federal acquisition standards understand there's limited authority. So I wouldn't overthink it that way. I would put in language that's reasonable
Right.
enough to.
I go with his comments
Yeah.
rather than
Let me go to members of the public. Do I have members of the public who are interested in making a comment?
Oh, yeah, I'll speak.
Ma'am.
Sharon Burrell, I live at 44 Boxville Road, and my mother's maiden name is Stow. I've lived here forever and ever and ever, longer than any of you people. And it's really, really miserable being in this seat. And it doesn't have to be, and I'm really surprised that this town has turned into what it's turned into. I'm not gonna cry, but I feel like crying, because if you look at this map, it would be so easy to do this, good for the town, good for us. But this town no longer looks at what is good for people. You look at what's good for that town. And there's a balance, like when you talk about the pole, I don't live near that pole, so it's like not in my backyard, but I feel for these people. And when you gave your little speech about whatever you spoke about,
I don't think
about
she's-
H&L-MP, this has to do with this.
I don't think she spoke about the poll.
Yes, she did. She did speak about it. And she
Oh,
said how
okay.
H&L-MP is such a great company and everything. But you didn't say that it's a balancing act between that woman's rights and what she has to look out at her front yard, which may or may not be necessary. So as a board, you guys have to look at what's good for the people and what's good for the town. If you look at this map, there's a way that we can all come to terms on it without us two lawyers having to fight this in court. I mean, I've had to fight cell towers in this town, I've had to fight everything in this town, because boards don't look at what...
What is your problem with this plan as currently?
I'll show you what the problem is. If you look at this map, the conservation people over here don't have a 40-foot guardrail over here. We only have it on our side of the road. This guardrail is absurd, and anyone who designed this bridge, I don't know what they're doing it for.
Okay.
It's simple.
So you're talking
It's a
about
simple thing.
details of the design.
But we were never even consulted
Right.
about this.
So-
We don't even have to get this $33,000. It's ridiculous.
Ma'am,
We're
we have
like-
not, the details of the design aren't what we're talking about now.
Oh, yes, it is, because they've already met with the state, and they planned their side
No.
really
So
nicely.
can I just clarify? We met with the Burrells. We have a detailed list of comments from them. We have a detailed list of comments from the town.
Okay.
We have a detailed list of comments from the Lords. All of that information is going to go to the state, and there will be subsequent meetings that we will participate in, that they will participate in, as we march our way down the design process. We have made no changes to these plans with regard to the town side, your side, anything. We just have the list of comments to go back to the state. at
No,
this
because
point.
you already met with the state.
Ma'am, I think you
already
can, I
said
think you can
no.
take your seat
We
now.
didn't.
You know,
I think you can take your seat
We
now.
brought you in as early in the process as we could.
And I
Well,
interrupt.
fine, we'll just do it in court then. I mean, it's ridiculous that you won't even let me hear me out.
No, I do. I just wanted you to sit down. So what did you have to say? What else did you have to say?
This doesn't have to have $33,000 of appraisal. We are not jerks. We want the bridge fixed. We just want it done so it doesn't ruin our property.
Sure.
They're not ruining their conservation side, so why when they met with the state, did they not protect our side like they protected their side?
So
that's
what
not
I'm hearing, hold on. What I'm hearing is that the conversations about the design, about the takings, about the price for the takings are far from over.
Oh yeah, they're far from over.
Right. And they're not taking place tonight. This is a much more narrow question, is that whether the Board of Selectmen is willing to start going down a road that the state wants to hear that we're willing to go down before they spend a dime.
Right.
So we've come up with some vague language that just says, we're willing to start going down that road. You will continue to have conversations about everything you just mentioned. The reason I don't want you to have it here is because it's pointless. We know nothing about it, okay? And by the way, all this talk about involuntary taking, I hate having it, okay? Nobody wants to do this. This is not meant to indicate that anybody wants to start going down that road. It's just what we have, that we're willing to even entertain the possibility. That's what we're struggling with tonight, and we just came up with language that we think we can deal with. Please continue the conversations with Kathy and anybody else who can actually help you.
Well, I'm just trying to say to you, everyone, we all should be on the same page. It shouldn't be such a hostile thing.
I don't think
It's been hostile, believe me.
Well-
And if we can just get on the same page, we won't have to spend $30,000 for appraisal fees.
All right.
We won't have to, but what I'm telling you is.
Ms. Burrell, I think we've heard enough. I understand your point, and I think we're ready to move on. Does anyone else want to have something to say? Mr. Hawks.
What I'm hearing is the state says this is the process that we are starting, and we want you to understand it, and there will be continued input from you folks that deal with it from those folks that are affected by it. Is that a correct, simple statement?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Fraser?
This is, I would like to make a comment that is in response
Sure.
to Mrs. Burrell. I'd just like to say that I actually love it when people come to a public hearing. And it's very important to me to hear what you have to say, to hear what somebody has to say about the process that we're doing. I'm dead serious that it is, to me it is, I've watched boards since I've been on them for the past several years, be informed by public comment and change the way they may have been thinking about a topic because of public comment. And so I really disagree with you that the town does not listen. I think that it is very much completely a part of how our town boards and committees work, that we listen to comment in public hearings.
I hope you're ready.
All right, on that note, thank you. Mr. Ryan, last word.
Last word. You know, as you said, I think it's a process right now, and at least what I've heard so far, I'll call it from both sides, is that the Burrells would like to work with us and work with the town, and I know that Kathy, you're on board with that, Jesse's on board with that. It's going to cost everybody a lot less money all the way around if we do that. So, you know, I think this is, you know, we do need to start moving forward on something like this. But as you said, Jim, you don't like talking about takings, especially if we can work a deal out in the long run, that's all.
Yeah, and
but we still have to go through this process.
For something like this, that should be possible, so.
Can I just add?
Yes.
I don't know if it'll make Mrs. Burrell feel any better, but there are definitely aspects of these plans that we, the Conservation Commission, do not like, the Stow Conservation Trust does not like, and I know there are aspects of the plans that they do not like. Those are the conversations we will continue to have with the state.
And hopefully with a
And
degree
hopefully
of
we'll all be happy
comity,
when we're done.
All right.
not comedy will prevail.
All right, let's keep these conversations going. There's no reason that everybody has to wind up in litigation or getting upset about this. Isn't the West End in Boston. This is a few feet around a bridge, and we ought to be able to all work this out. Do I have a motion? I'm sorry.
You have the motion.
You've got the motion. You wrote it down.
So I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Selectmen intends to undertake the federal acquisition process with respect to the right-of-ways and easements necessary for the renovation of the Box Mill Bridge.
Second. So moved. I'm sorry. So moved.
So moved. And do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to state our intention to undertake the federal acquisition process with regard to the right-of-ways and easements on the Box Mill Bridge. Further discussion.
Can I?
Mr. Ryan.
Just one quick question. Why do we have to be following for a small bridge over a little brook? Why do we have to be following federal regulations?
My guess is because this money comes from the TIP, and ultimately the TIP money comes from the feds, from what used to be called block grants. Now, and then we're called earmarks for the transportation process. And it's the same reason that we had to follow federal guidelines on Track Mill Road 10 years ago, Track Road, when we're trying to build a simple bike path, because ultimately the money sources back to the feds.
Hence, we never did it.
Yeah, I'm not saying,
So,
right.
But I think, it sounds like everybody, it's probably a good thing to do this bridge.
I think the town administrator.
Mr. Wrigley.
The presumptive position of the state is that the federal law is applicable here. That's why we're doing it. If we want to go forward, we agree to that term. They're not clearly going to, with any negotiation, decide, no, we don't have to follow that aspect of it. So,
You mean Stow can't fuck the federal government?
come on, let's see where you're going with it. The only thing I would say is I would add and take any other action relative thereto at the end, because I haven't read the Acquisition Act in a long time, but there's some other things that might, on the periphery, be in force and effect or be applicable, and so
Okay, do I have an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I amend the motion to include the wording suggested by the town administrator.
Do I have a second to the amendment?
Second.
So the final motion reads, the Board of Selectmen intends to undertake the federal acquisition process with respect to the right-of-ways and easements necessary for the renovation of Box Mill Bridge and take any other actions relative thereto. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Mr. Burke?
No, I said that's vague enough.
Oh, okay.
Jesse, if it's not good enough for the DOT, tell them, yeah, they can always come back.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions?
if
All right.
DOT wanted more, they'd give it to us. Otherwise, they get what they've left us with.
Here, here.
We can't buck the federal government, we can buck the state government.
No,
Fucking anybody.
No.
All right. Mr. and Mrs. Burrell, thank you very much for attending.
I dealt with a bit on this at the front end, and I can just tell you.
Okay. Good luck working together. It's only 25% done.
Thank you. All right, thank you. And I don't see Mr. Hyde. Oh, well, I do see him. There he is. Come on up, Doug.
Hiding back here. He was hoping you
He's
would-
hiding.
He fell asleep, he's bumping in the chair back
Probably
there.
always hides.
So, I asked,
I'm sure you've had a lot of that.
I asked for a quick update, and Doug, it can really be quick, on the process of the town hall restoration, simply because I have kind of lost sight of where it stands, and presumably then some other board members have, although I know 2 board members are on the committee. Do you want to just give us a very encapsulated version of where everything stands?
Yes, we got money from CPC at annual town meeting to retain architectural and engineering expertise to guide us in this project. They've presented us with information that has surprised the committee as to the value of this project. We've decided to stop and regroup to look at our options, to inform the populace, to, as is said by other committee members, to socialize our findings, because we are suffering from sticker shock. And whether or not we will continue with sticker shock remains to be seen, but we wanted to stop and rethink. So we were hoping to go to this annual town meeting with a request for funding from CPC for the rehabilitation project. We are not going to do that. Instead, we are asking CPC for some more money for follow-up engineering expertise, design plans that can go out to bid, and to, as I said earlier, to get everybody on board.
So did they do concept designs? Is that what you're saying, or?
There's really no, when you deal with the architectural world, it's difficult to know what their terms are, but there's really nothing to conceptualize about repairing the town hall. It's 4 rooms.
Right, okay.
The only thing we have to conceptualize really is putting in an elevator or a LULA, a low occupancy, low use elevator, or a wheelchair lift to get around the accessibility issues. We've changed a doorway. We've proposed doing away with the fire escape.
And the estimate on that gave you sticker shock?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's been told 1.75 to 2.2 million, and with all of the architectural assistance, our prices are in the vicinity, without negotiating, without playing hardball with them, 3.1 million.
3.5.
3.5 million, thank you.
Okay. All right, I understand that a little better. Let me, what I had also lost track of were our intentions on use. The last time I was involved in any conversations, there were hopes that the Historical Society was going to use a significant portion of the basement and perhaps the first floor. Last I heard, that was not going to happen. What's the current thinking on use if it goes forward? Is there any current thinking on use?
It doesn't really matter to be honest with you. The major amount of repair work needs to be done in what we're calling the basement. And so whether somebody's going to use it or whether we're just going to repair it so that the building doesn't fall down, the only thing that's going to be missing is a coat of paint and some window shades and maybe a wall to create an office. The society and the Historical Society aren't quite sure what they want to do. The commission would like a number of square feet, and we've proposed an idea, but if that doesn't go, it really doesn't go.
I hear what you're saying, and I think it makes a difference in terms of selling a town meeting, especially if it's a big number. Before people want to spend money like that magnitude, even if it is CPC money, they want to have some idea of what it's for. But all right, that tells me I haven't missed anything on the use front.
No, but it's important to understand from our perspective that, especially where I sit, I'm a firm believer now that if we build it and we build it nicely, it will be used, and it really won't matter to us anyway, and to the town, whether the Historical Commission, the Historical Society, or the Cemetery Department takes residence in a portion of it. Those other portions will be used by other groups who want to get into that facility.
Okay.
So whether it be upstairs or downstairs.
Mr. Burke, I'm going to hold off on you two just because you're more informed. I want to give them a chance to ask questions. Mr. Burke.
And that's just the point. I am less informed, although I appreciate that you guys have been working. I've heard from your finance committee representative about some of your doings and the sticker shock. And in terms of socializing the decision making, do you think at some point, Mr. Hyde, it would be advantageous to hold a public hearing where you can just throw out to the town what you've been doing and, well,
Yes.
why you've got sticker shock?
Yes, that's part of the process, and we are now getting to that part of the process.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Hawes.
I think I might have got part of the answer to one of your, I like flowery phrases. I've never heard socialize our findings.
I didn't come up with that.
Can you explain it?
Hold meetings, hold fundraisers, canvass outside of the Stop and Shop supermarket. Stop and Shop anymore.
I mean Shaw's?
Shaw's, thank you.
Thank you.
Put up billboards at the
Thank you.
community center.
I get the picture now. I have one other question that has escaped me for the moment. I yield back for the moment, Mr. Chairman.
I thought I knew where you were going, now I forget too. Okay.
I'm in good company then.
All right, I feel like I'm satisfied. Do you guys want to add anything?
Well, I was just gonna throw in that, as Doug said, the use isn't going to change the cost that much. We're looking at leaving the main hall essentially as is, a couple tweaks which don't add a lot of dollars. But the windows, the insulation, the heating system, the electrical system, and then the repairs down in the basement, and a Lula or wheelchair lift, we're being told 3.5 mil, we're all in.
I'm sorry, Ms. Fraser.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I'm not disagreeing with you, and I don't want to prolong this. I hear similar things at the library. Every time they start talking about spending money on the physical plant at the library, if you ask them, so you're committing to staying at the Randall Library? Nope, but the town will have to spend money on it because it's a lovely building and part of our history. And now I'm hearing it here. I don't know. Though I'm not disagreeing with the general point, at some point, I personally feel like I want to know what the plan is for using it. But we're not going to decide that tonight.
So I'd have a quick comment on that. To me, part of socializing the findings would be to...
I think I just heard that.
I'm not fond of this. I was going to say, I'm not fond of this phrase, but...
I'm trying to help you wrap your heads around it. I think it would be holding, educating the public or inviting public input in order to continue to inform the process of the restoration committee. To me, I agree with Doug that the building will get used, that the uses will be found, and that, I mean, we see that with other
If you build it, they will come.
buildings that we have, whether they're derelict or not. I have one more comment, and that is that when, in construction, when you get to a certain point of spending a certain amount of money, then it is required to bring everything up to code. And so what's happening here is that I believe I understand that in addressing the repairs, the structural repairs in the basement and the moisture problems in the basement, we will trigger that amount, and we will wind up needing to put in a new electrical service, which will serve a better heating system, that we will insulate the walls, that we will put storm windows on, and so many areas, almost all areas of the building will be touched, and that's what's expensive. And so even though we don't really intend to change the way the building will look and feel when you go back in there, it will be a modernized historic building that would then be good to go for many years to come. And it will, my goal on the committee has also been to be sure that we can sort of accommodate as much variety and use as possible with this renovation without going crazy. And so just what is it possible that we would want without doing goofy things?
Is anyone, that was a good explanation, is anyone exploring other grant funds, so we don't have to tap out?
That is also part of the process.
Okay.
One of the stone walls, the town has to agree to become I don't know the technical term, but in a partnership with the state. You agree to something or other, and that's what Sterling had to do. Jesse thought that we were in that club, and we're not. But when you're in that club, you can apply for grants. So the elevator Lula could be granted out. There may be energy grants available for part of the HVAC system. We haven't investigated all of that because we're not at that point.
Okay. I feel, Bill.
Just a quick comment. I think if you presume, and I believe Courtney stated it rather clearly, if you've made the decision to save that building, you're all in on code because you can't opt out. You might be able to phase the work over time so that you're paying the time value of money on it. Presume that you would do minimum changes to the layout because that just adds costs. And I think the Mass Historic came and took a look, but you're pretty clean there.
Yes.
So presume that you do very little to add cost to that by space use, subdivision of space different than it is, and leaving it the same. That reduces the cost. The rest of it, if you're going to go at it to save it, if you say, yep, we should save that building to be functional in the future, it's going to be expensive. So either it's a go or no go from, if I were doing it at that point, okay, yes, we want to save it. So then the question is how cost effectively to do it, but most of the costs are in the code improvements. And that code is going to continue to be more, the stretch code came and now it's other things. But to simplify it, if I was making that decision, what we use it specifically for. I personally would love to see an historical society in town because we're a community that has many folks, constituents involved in that. That building would set up well for that, just use as an example.
Right.
But trying to get to more refined space use probably is a distraction from what I think is the core question. Do you want to save the building or not? And if you do, then you go about seeing how you might spread out the cost of the improvements to bring it up to code. But I don't even know how much code will allow for that either. I mean, if you go in there and you do so much, you're in all, correct?
All right. I really would like to move on, but Mr. Ryan, do you want the last?
No, if you don't want any more information, I'm not going to force it.
No, I feel like I know where we stand. I feel like you've done your job. I appreciate it. I'm glad I put it on the agenda. I don't think I was the only one who needed an update. So, Doug, thank you.
I used to work for a guy who used the phrase, "I know nothing about this. Please push back the frontiers of my ignorance." You have just pushed back my frontiers, thank you.
See what you started, Doug, with socializing. Guys, she's repeated, you bring it up. Lengthy will be.
All right.
Run, Doug.
Let us move on to the renewal of the 2020 liquor licenses, if we could.
Okay, here's Mr. Hudson.
I'm hoping
To read
it's
the
home.
motions.
I asked Maureen, and we got an update from the police department, and no complaints, no concerns on the part of the police department, no complaints from the ABCC. So I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the town's 2020 liquor licenses for the following businesses. Stow Food and Beverage LLC, Stow Acres Country Club, 58 Randall Road, Stow. J. Malone and Sons, DBA Stowaway Golf Course, 121 White Pond Road in Stow. Nick Crow's Spirits Incorporated, DBA Colonial Spirits of Stow, 117 Great Road in Stow. Ken's Liquor Shop Incorporated, 8 Hudson Street in Stow. Robert Page III LLC, DBA Butternut Farm Golf Club, 115 Wheeler Road in Stow. Wedgwood Country Club of Stow Incorporated, 215 Harvard Road. Russell's Convenience Store of Stow, 390 Great Road. The Airfield Cafe Incorporated, DBA Nancy's Airfield Cafe, 302 Boxborough Road. And Red River Rock Incorporated, Red Ginger Restaurant, 117 Great Road.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, you
said second.
you just said got a second.
Motion's been made and it's on my bad side. Motion's been made and seconded to renew the liquor license for 2020 at the establishment specified. Further discussion, Mr. Burke.
I don't want to prolong this, but I just have a question. Is Stowaway Golf Course operating, and is it still serving liquor? Do we know that?
I think
They are not operating at the moment. They're restructuring the golf course and relaying it out, but they wanted to maintain their alcohol license. Plan on opening in the spring.
Okay.
Okay, with that, yeah, okay.
So it raised an interesting point, though. I'm assuming that each one of these people has voiced their desire to get their license renewed.
Yes, they get an inquiry letter every year, and
Okay.
And they had to pay money
And
to
they
get
had to
it.
pay the money.
And Stowaway did,
they,
okay.
yes,
Take their money.
Good question.
But
Good question. Are you satisfied with that?
I am satisfied.
Okay.
I just don't want to grant liquor
No,
licenses
yeah.
to businesses that aren't.
No, you don't want, especially with a limited number of liquor licenses, you don't want people just holding on to them for nothing, but, okay, as long as they plan on reopening. Further questions? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no.
Thanks for being here.
Abstentions, nothing. All right,
We need to sign those.
we do need to sign those, so we'll take a moment on
It's a
that.
time-sensitive issue, I believe.
Yeah, and I got bad news for the town administrator. I want him to stay for this next item, the policy on the alcohol. And I just want to tell you while Courtney's getting ready, so when we start talking about the next item, the policy on the alcohol, Courtney, I don't want to focus, I don't want to start the conversation with the thing that I put in the packet. Courtney did an amendment, and I think we'll start with that one. I didn't sign that.
Come back at you.
Everybody notice I brought a pen tonight?
I would have lent you
Well
one.
done.
I brought two, just in case.
Thank you.
Looks like the one
I
I
would have
gave
given
you.
you my
I
feet.
think, no, this is my own, but I do think I owe a few back to the office.
I owe mine back to a dentist.
I picked mine up at the bank.
There you go.
They have all the money.
They got those little chains on them.
No, it's been a while since you've been to the bank.
Clippers.
I go
I
to the
think
bank.
jar of pens waiting for
They
you.
don't have chains on them anymore?
No, they have their name on them, so you can go advertise with them.
That's right.
It's always nice to
Please
get
steal
one.
this book.
Yes.
Yes.
You ever read that, Don?
Keep
Yes.
signing, folks, keep
We're
signing.
signing. We're vamping while we're signing.
Good.
We want these establishments to stay in business for the new year.
I didn't realize you were an Abby Hoffman fan, Tom.
Still rivers run deep.
All right, as I said, I'd like to start the discussion with Courtney's draft, which I can't find, but, and then I gave you an amendment that I talked to Courtney about that adds a paragraph in purple or pink at the bottom.
I got my draft. Do you want me to read it?
So we had oh, I have it.
That's mine, but
No, I haven't.
I was lending it to you.
So we had a discussion about this a while ago, and the result after several votes was we did nothing. And I tasked the other selectmen, which coming up with a new draft, if anybody had one. Ms. Frecia took the bull by the horns and has this. Courtney, do you want to talk about what your new draft does?
Sure, so, what my proposal is to allow the town to have alcohol at events on town property. So
Can you
a board-
speak up a bit, please?
Sure, I'll start afresh. So my proposal is to, where on the previous draft, there was to be no use of alcohol in town-sponsored events on town property. My proposal is to allow that use under the guidance of a tip-certified server and with the appropriate insurance. And so what that would look like is, even if there were an event where there was a sort of a potluck element where folks were going to bring food and beverages, that there would be a server present who would preside over the beverage table and be the one dispensing the alcoholic beverages, so that there would be no question of someone overindulging due to lack of supervision.
So then I added a paragraph. So basically, under Courtney's draft, the town departments in the town will be treated like anyone else. And if it was a small event, what we're calling a private event is something where there's a closed guest list, and you don't anticipate more than 20 people. Under her draft, indemnification would be required, not a tip certified person. She kept the exemption for ceremonial events. But in a public event is the more common thing. It's bigger than 20 basically. Anyone serving alcohol on town property, including the town or town departments, would have to have a tip certified server and provide insurance. And she clarified that this means if it's a BYOB event, people bring their own booze, the booze has to be served by the tip server. I added something. I thought she had forgotten the fact that we had talked to the insurance company. And, the insurance company recommended that if the town were ever to have events with alcohol at it where the town is serving, that department should buy a one-day special events insurance policy, which costs $100 to $300, so that if the worst happens and there's a claim, the premiums on the main policy do not increase. So I added the paragraph that's in pink, which basically says that. It says that the town departments are subject to all those requirements above, but instead of the indemnification and the insurance, they would have to buy this special events policy. I just want to say for the record, I still think the best thing to do was what town council said, which was nothing. But, I recognize everybody's going to compromise, and I recognize cultural changes take time. But I believe Mr. Burke wants to be heard on this matter.
If the chair prefers to hear me now, thanks very much for doing this. I see from the minutes of the last meeting, I still call you a selectman fresh up.
Yes, thank you.
I agree with the chair that we should not have town departments, town employees holding these kinds of events where they serve liquor. I think the ceremonial event exception is not, I understand it's a laudably conciliatory step, it's unnecessary. I just don't see any retirement parties where anybody hosts a glass of champagne. If somebody wants a retirement party, there are lots of venues around here, like Wedgwood or wherever, where they can have these, they can have those parties and they can serve as much as they want. I think the distinction between private and public event based on reasonably anticipated attendance is unworkable. You know, no matter who comes in, they'll always say, hey, we're not expecting more than 20 people. And then if the same group keeps asking for permits to serve liquor on public property and they regularly underestimate attendance, what is the building department supposed to do? I don't think we should delegate to the building department the responsibility of seeing that people are coming in at 20 rather than 21. I think private event should be defined solely by whether there's a closed guest list. By that I mean where there are certain identifiable groups of people who are going to be invited. Stow Conservation Trust, having a dinner is a private event. They're going to invite the members and their guests. The Friends of the COA, and this is where I'm willing to bend. The Friends of the COA or any of the Friends groups having an event is a private event. But when parents want to hold a pre-prom party as a fundraiser, that's a public event. If I ever use the deposit I gave to the town administrator for my daughter's wedding reception, that would be a public event. The defining criteria should be...
How'd I get dragged in this?
Yeah, because you took $200 from me. So they, should be, for the new communities, it said should be an identifiable existing group holding an event for its members and guests as per usual, and no non-members are being accepted. That being said, I do not think that we should eliminate insurance coverage for private events. A hold harmless agreement, unless it's coming from a millionaire, is meaningless. The possibility of a catastrophic $1 million loss from somebody driving home drunk is only half that of a public event with 40 people, assuming you should be using numbers. And if hard liquor is served at the so-called private event, that's probably an equal level of risk. I think everyone who uses town property and everyone who serves liquor should get a one-day insurance coverage and a certificate of insurance naming the town of Stow. That's my feeling on that. The only distinction I would make between a private and public event is that a private event doesn't need a tip certified server. But there should be, as we've continued to maintain in the last few years, there should be one person identified as responsible for overseeing the serving of liquor. Those are my thoughts.
So,
and I appreciate everyone's hard work.
But can I ask you, I'm a little confused. So are you saying you'd prefer to see put back in something that says town departments, the town and town departments, no alcohol?
Yeah, yes. Quite frankly, I did see that. I think the work, you know, and I've read the memos again. I read the updated memos again. I think just having employees of the town involved in serving liquor on town property, believe me, I understand the cultural imperatives here and the historical traditions, but we're in a new town. I mean, this isn't the same town that I came here 22 years ago and found that the highway barn after Springfest was, people were grilling burgers and serving booze. It was a wonderful place, and that's my wife, and I was excited. I said, hey, to my wife, I said, this is a great place. Look at all the people. come together and partying, but it's a different place now. And there are different liquor liability laws or decisions now. I will defer to my colleagues, of course, but I am persuaded by the chair and my colleague, Mr. Hogg, said if town employees want to have liquor at a retirement party or a holiday party, there are plenty of venues in the area. They don't need a ceremonial toast of champagne. But again, I'd be willing to listen to my colleagues on that. But my biggest concern is that we make a distinction between private and public event based upon attendance that's unworkable, and also if even 20 people can cause a risk of a catastrophic loss, there should be coverage for that event. On the other hand, as I said, and I hope I haven't spent too much time answering the chair's questions, on the other hand, I don't think friends of COA or friends of this or friends of that are necessarily town employees. They should be able to come in and hold an event, serve liquor, as long as they get the appropriate certificate of insurance.
So you're saying with a private event is just a closed guest list, so there could be 150 people there, and you don't think there needs to be a tip certified server?
Well, now that you're saying that to the extreme, yeah, okay, fine. Put in the tip server for, or you can put in a tip server for any event where the number is going to be over, let's say, what, 25?
Well, it currently says 20, so you're saying...
Or 20, but I think that based upon reasonable expected attendance, that's just unworkable for the building department to enforce. I don't think there should be a number, but if you wanted to put in a number for tip certified server, or just, all right, fine, just have it, as Ms. Fresia suggested, and then I'll shut up, don't worry, Mr. Hawks. Then just have a tip certified for private events too.
I think Mr. Ryan wants to be heard.
Yeah, me too.
I do too.
Oh, okay.
No, one of the things is that the original draft that you did, Jim, and then that Courtney, I'll say elegantly, after I agonized over it a long time, she did it very elegantly. But when I started reading through the private event, an event where there is a closed guest list and not just anyone may attend, and it's anticipated that there'll be less than 20, all right? So what it says is, if it's not a closed guest list, then it becomes a public event, or if there's more than 20, it becomes a public event. It defaults to that. So the thing is, the only time that you're going to ask somebody to have a TIPS certified is if it is public and or you expect over 20, which definitely limits it. You've got your private event, and we're calling anything over 20 has to have a TIP certified, period, end of discussion. Doesn't matter if it's a closed guest list or not. So by changing that, very simply, and taking out the town employees and then making sure that all public events have a TIP certified bartender, and all public events, which is anything over what you would expect to be 20, is going to also require the $1 million to $2 million. So the thing is, it effectively does what you had said for anything that can even remotely be figured to be over 20 people, right? One of the things that I ended up doing is, I've got a list of, I'll call it the town groups in the last year that it would have affected, all right? We've issued 10 licenses in the last year. 4 of them were off-site, 4 were at Pompo, 2 were at the town hall, and only 2 of them actually had a town board involved in it. One of them was the Stow Cultural Council at an art exhibition, and that would have been considered a public event because it's not a closed guest list. Therefore, they would default to needing the insurance and needing a tip certified server. The other one was Springfest at Pompo, the little concert that they had there. Again, open or a public event, therefore subject to the insurance and the tip certification. So in the last year, those were the only two.
But SCT?
SCT is, that was
Not
it?
a town board.
It's not a town board, so that would have been covered under the other ones. So I was
So
different.
SCT would have been closed guest list, but reasonably anticipated over 20. So that would have required a tip certified server.
Right.
And insurance. You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So mine, when you're done.
I was just gonna say, you know.
Well, I'd like to go to Mr. Hunt.
Okay.
One
Okay.
kind of from each side. It's interesting how this
Yep.
has divided. Were you done?
No.
Mr. Hawks?
I wasn't quite done.
Oh, then Mr.
I
Ryan,
just figured
sorry.
I'd run through the rest of them.
Yeah,
You know, we
sure.
had Neshoba after prom, which would have been, you know,
Yep.
over 20. The Cultural Council, Food Pantry was Wedgewood Pines, I'll just do on town property. Springfest, Oars was at Pompo, they probably would have had to have tips. Randall Friends of the Library at the library, not quite sure. And then the SCT meeting. You know, the other ones were not on town property.
So, Mr., are you finished?
Yeah.
That was a lot of work, thank you. Mr. Hawks?
What we've just heard makes trying to define a noise bylaw by committee look like Legos. We're trying to write a poem by committee. You can't do it. It doesn't rhyme. This doesn't make sense. This one and that one. Who's going to enforce this? You're going to need a full-time interpreter of this language that we're struggling so hard to get around.
Well, what does that lead to?
Excuse me, can I just finish?
Yeah.
I'm getting to that. I know it's late. Societal shifts. Liability. I don't want to see this town settled now or in the future with something because we parsed something incorrectly at this meeting. Somebody dies and sues this town for $10 million, whatever that. If I don't take exception to the law, you can't do that. Grant me my poetic license. The town council, advised us for good money paid for services rendered. The safest thing to do is no alcohol on town property, period. I don't want to leave this meeting with that hanging over my head, that, okay, well, we did this, we did that, we did tips, we did 120 versus 10 versus 5. No, there should be no alcohol on town property by anybody.
Okay. But that's not where you are, right, Brian?
I'm willing to, yes, no, I think that's too stark a change, with all due respect to my colleague, Mr. Hawks. I think, though, that we need to get some kind of compromise here. Yeah, it's easy to say no alcohol on town property, and there's a lot to be said for that position. On the other hand, I'm not sure my colleagues are willing to go that far. I'm trying to find something that is, at this point, acceptable, and is not only acceptable to the majority of the board, but also workable.
Mr. Chairman, I was cut off one last
Oh, I apologize.
Sorry, I didn't realize.
concluding thought, flowing from my reference to town council opinion, well paid for. Footnote, we also note adult consumption of marijuana is now lawful. If you are trying to write an allowance for a consumption of a lawful intoxicant, where does it stand? Next month, after this goes into effect, and somebody comes in and says, we want to hold a pot party at Pompo. How's that for alliteration? What are you gonna say then? Thank you.
Before I go, Brian, let me ask you something. I didn't follow everything you were saying, but when you were talking about the reasonably anticipated, you didn't like reasonably anticipated, but then you seemed open to a number, and I'm not sure what language you were saying should precede any number. Just the number? If it happens to be over 20 or 25,
No.
you need tips, or?
I think the distinction between private and public event, for the most part, and well, I understand it, is unworkable. I mean, in one sense, we should just have one event, because every single event does need, in my opinion, insurance coverage. And then, in that, to follow up on that, if you're gonna require a tip server, I was willing to waive a tip server for a small group.
But how are you defining that? That's what I'm asking you.
I-
Because I try to define it, as does Ms. Fresha, as reasonably anticipated, no more than 20. What is your alternative?
No, my alternative isn't to say reasonably alternative. My alternative would be to say, if more than 20 people show up, you have to have a tip server.
Okay. He's got a point.
Because people will always come in and under.
I don't say that about Brian a lot.
Thank you for the levity.
I don't think he was being funny. I think he was intending to be serious.
No.
Well,
One of the things we
thanks
had-
for making me laugh.
He's got a point.
One of the
That
things-
reasonably anticipated is begging to be a loophole.
Oh,
Mr.
one-
Hawks has a point too, but I say that more
Thank you.
often.
One of the things is, though, is that the distinction between public and private, and the throwing the 20 people in there, right? Anything that any town board would do, as far as the town boards go, would be a public event.
You're absolutely right. What Mr. Burke is getting at is that he's, I think, trying to close a loophole where someone could say, oh, I wasn't expecting 100 people to show up. I was thinking it was only going to be 15. So that's why we don't have a tip certified server. And 100 people show up. How was I supposed to know? So my question for you is, and you meaning Ms. Fraser and Mr. Ryan, would you accept an amendment where in the definitions of private and public event, you take out the words, it is reasonably anticipated that? So it just reads, not just anyone may attend, and there will be fewer than 20 attendees, where there will be 20 attendees or more. Well, let me tell you this, I think he's got a good point. And my heart is with Mr. Hawks. I'm not going to support it without that amendment. And I'm not guaranteeing I'll support it with the amendment, but I'm definitely not going to support it without that amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't have any difficulty taking out reasonably anticipated. I think if there's a closed guest list, it should be able to be determined how many people are invited, and therefore how many could reasonably show up. So it shouldn't be a mystery, and
But you get into the kind of enforcement and reading of minds
understood.
that Mr. Burke was,
Understood.
and he has a point. The more bright lines we have here, the better.
Absolutely. So I have no problem taking that language out. Where there will be 20 attendees or more, and where there will be
All right.
fewer than 20.
I don't think that doesn't sound like that's enough to get Mr. Burke on board, but.
So I have another
we'll
point,
see.
if I might, about the private event. And that is that a small group hosting an event for 20 or fewer people it's theoretically a pretty low budget affair. And if they have to have a bartender who costs them $300 and also insurance They just won't hold the event, which is fine, I understand. But there are certain things, I mean, I suspect that, for instance, the Friends of the Randall Library would like to have whatever it is that they do in the library or in a town building rather than at some other venue that doesn't sort of
May I address that, Mr. Chair?
pertain to their event, to their purpose.
Are you finished?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope I didn't interrupt you, Mr. President. Look, when we're talking 20 people, you can have it at your house. I mean, you really don't need this is why I think the distinction between private and public event isn't that meaningful. If you're going to have 20 people, the Randall Library can have it at the chair of the Randall Library's house, or they can have it at somebody's house. We really don't need to have our public buildings used for these small events. The idea would be, if you're going to serve liquor, it should be for a substantial event that's going, and that's just how it's going to work out anyway. Do you see my point?
May I rebut?
Oh, yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
Sure.
So I hear your point, and there's this concept of having a third place. If I host an event at my house, it's personal, it's my house. If you host an event at your house, it's subject to your hospitality and your rules. If the event is if we meet at the hardware store, so I mean, if let me change the example. If I invite somebody to my house for coffee, it's very different from meeting them at Emma's Cafe. So there are times when having an event in a public place can serve a very different purpose. People meet on a slightly more common turf, and there isn't the circumscription of being polite to the hostess whose house or host whose house they're at. So opinions might be expressed at the common place that they wouldn't be at the private abode. And so culturally, what I think I'm talking about is creating the opportunity for people to meet and bridge lots of opinions. It's kind of like being here, only less formal, and we're not on TV. We get to meet and express and mill about, and it's a cultural norm, or at least it has been for, I think, many years, that some folks get a little bit more relaxed when they have alcohol, and that's why we're talking about all this. Sometimes that's a problem. I'm almost finished. Okay? And I know you probably get more relaxed than some people do.
Oh, that's not fair.
Accurate, but not fair.
I just want to expand this much further. So I would probably not be giving you this pain by being on the select board if I had not been to several parties that a couple were hosted privately, but also there were holiday parties that were at public places. And what happened for me was that I got to know other people in town government, and I got to feel comfortable, and it made me willing to continue to step up. So that's one example.
Just briefly, Mr. Chair.
I don't think
Yes,
you've done
although
quite
this is getting very philosophical.
I'm going to bring it down. Look, I'm sure that my colleague Ms. Fresh has got far more experience in some of these parties than I do. It's just that in my experience, where people share opinions, alcohol is not a good influence. All I'm saying here is, you don't want to have it in the house, you can go reserve a room or part of one of the bars in Maynard.
But you're not advocating for banning it completely like Mr. Hawks is. right?
No, I
Okay.
think I've been clear about that. I just think
So we continue to be very divided, though the needle is moving, I believe, toward the more restrictive side than our last conversation. I find myself, frankly, very betwixt and between here. My heart is with Mr. Hawks, very much so. But I am starting to recognize I do not like where we are right now. We are now, I mean, we have nothing. And I am anticipating some changes in membership on the board in the near future, and I don't know that I see us likely to move towards something. So that's motivating me toward compromising my position. In general, I liked the compromise that Ms. Frazier came up with. It wasn't that far from the compromise that I reluctantly came up with last time. You know, Mr. Burke is pulling me back a little bit on the banning it for town and town departments, and I would like to go there. I will not forget the town clerk sitting there, and she said what I was thinking, which was, I don't see any reason why town departments need to have an event with alcohol, period, end of story. I worked in public employment for over 20 years, and we got rid of that nonsense, and we were better for it. Nonetheless, again, I thought what Ms. Frazier, I think what Ms. Frazier came up with my small modifications, represents right now the best path forward and the only realistic alternative to what we got right now, which is nothing. So is there a motion?
I would call, if this were town meeting, I would.
Yeah, I know, I would too.
Move the
Absolutely.
question.
Does the town administrator have anything, does he want to stay away from this third rail?
Wow. That's a good comment. If you'd asked me that 2 meetings ago, I would have asked. I can't change the course of events now and don't choose to, so.
No, I think this discussion is showing we have to talk about this. And I mean, I just speak for myself, I don't like where we are right now.
Well, Jim.
And I have reason for that, so.
You had expressed the possibility that if we change just the wording from reasonably believed to be 20, and that way, you know, if somebody starts breaking that rule, you end up finding out about it. If there were 50 people when they said there were going to be 20, you know, they break it once, you don't let them do it again, period.
And part of the point of having a policy, to be perfectly honest, is that it protects the town. And if somebody decides they want to break it, they're on the hook and we're not, to be perfectly honest. And if some town department head decides they want to get cute and end run this, they do that at their own risk.
So,
could I weigh in? No, they should ask me.
Yes.
In part, I think it's a solution looking for a problem. We've made it overly restricted now for use of that space under the statutes with regard to kitchen use and other things. If at this moment you could get a majority, if you can resolve tips or no tips, go or no go, I would simply say, regardless of the number, you have tips. Given that you have to pay for insurance anyway, most people can find somebody who's tip certified, and they can do it for nothing. And I agree, if you've got 10 people, you're not going down to Pompo. With all the other restrictions we got and the cost of renting a hall, you'd be, yeah, I'd like to know who it is that's gonna sign up for that. I would simply say, if this is gonna move the needle to a majority, I would take the number out and simply say, if you're going to serve alcohol in the function room down at Pompo, I'll just use that as an example, or anyone else, you have someone tip certified. Because again, it's easy to find now, it's cheaper than the insurance you're gonna have to buy regardless of the number. So if that would get a majority here.
Well, I think we may have a majority. Normally I would table it and try to write something along those lines, but I think this may be our last, what? Oh, Mr. Hawks, you have something to say?
No.
So picking up on what Mr. Ryan was saying, Is there a motion to move the version that has the pink language at the bottom with the extra addition of deleting, it is reasonably anticipated that, and it is reasonably anticipated that, from both the definition of private and public event?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Burke.
May I also suggest we get rid of the ceremonial event?
No. No.
I'm suggesting it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't tell me I can't suggest it.
Oh, you can't.
Well, a motion has been made and seconded, and the moving select person, when we had that discussion, doesn't want to accept the friendly amendment. So, motion has been made and seconded to pass, as long as everybody's clear now, the version with the pink language with the stuff about reasonably anticipated taken out. And if that doesn't pass, Mr. Burke, then you can make another motion for discussion. Seeing
Last
here.
comment.
Yes, Mr. Hawks.
If this passes, I hope someday somebody does it right. It's okay. He was tip certified on a tombstone.
Okay. Further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay, so that's 4-1. I will make these edits for our next regular meeting, and I will want to make sure that everyone's comfortable with that, because this was a complicated discussion. And we'll figure out a way. Everyone voted in favor, so anyone could do a motion for reconsideration.
Everyone voted in favor?
Everyone who I anticipate to be there will vote in favor. All right. Thank you very much for a difficult but important discussion.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes, please.
I understand what everybody's been trying to do, and I really appreciate everybody putting their heart and soul into it. Because I know, Jim, you didn't agree with everything. I don't agree with everything. I'm sure Courtney doesn't agree with everything. But what we've done is we've come up with a compromise that I think we can all live with and try to maintain some of the friendly, small things that have made this town great. All right? But at the same time realizing that times have changed. So it's, I seem to recall that if nobody's 100% happy with it, it's probably a good compromise.
It is a compromise. So we'll see what it looks like in the cold light of day at another meeting. And,
thank you for taking it on. Thank you, Courtney.
Courtney, thank you for keeping the ball going.
Yep.
And thank you all. Let's go on to our next agenda item. And that, I think, is the town administrator's report. Mr. Wrigley?
Basically, I summarized with the PFAS public forum is coming up, give you some detail on Thursday. Did want to mention that Tina McAndrew has been hired, and I approved the hiring as the new library director. 3 projects ongoing quickly, town building HVAC, first and second floor system complete pretty much. Basement and 3rd floor, which will be heat pumps, mini splits. Extra money was available given the bid, and Craig is having that work done now. The same company, Mechanical Contractors, that's doing this building has just won the low bid to get the new furnaces and fire station. And the elevator project, reached an agreement in principle with the contractor there to get started. Pretty much it.
That's it?
Thanks for staying.
I think he's going to stay. Let's go to liaison reports. Mr. Burke?
We want to let Mr. Wrigley go?
No, I think he feels like staying tonight. Correct, yes.
Oh, yes, okay. Understood, sorry. I have no liaison reports other than we've gotten a decision from the DPU about the Eversource. I was a liaison to the other committee, excuse me, to the other towns who were affected, Hudson and Sudbury. I think we blew the chance to make comments. I didn't realize you had about 10 days to make comments.
I think less.
Less than 10 days. And then I suppose we could send town council next Thursday at the public hearing, but I don't know what we'd tell her to say. So I don't know. It's and quite frankly, I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing.
It's 300 pages long. The conservation agent, Kathy, did send us all,
Yeah.
she sent Bill an email that Bill sent to all of us with her thoughts about it, but her individual thoughts, not the conservation department's thoughts. You know, I looked through it for specific things. I didn't, I think her email will summarize the state of her thinking right now. And, you know, it's highly technical. I didn't. There are a lot of restrictions. Although it is an approval of the preferred alternative, which is the underground, there are a lot of restrictions. So I don't know what as an intervener, I don't know what our next steps are right now. And keep in mind, it's only a tentative decision. So they take these comments and then they make it final. They change it or not, and then they make it final. And then, of course, there's the opportunity to appeal if you want. So
I can't remember what our rights are as intervener, even
Yeah,
though it was
I don't
about
know.
3 years ago when we decided to be intervener.
I think it gives you the
After
right.
reviews.
I think it gives you the right to appeal. I think that's my memory.
And also to comment, but.
A comment.
I've given my liaison report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Fraser.
I was at the Community Preservation Committee meeting last night. They have 6 applications for funding that they will be considering to possibly take to town meeting, which could total, if they were all voted in, close to $3 million. The cash on hand at present is in excess of $4 million, I think approximately 4.2. So there's 3 proposals from the Recreation Commission, one from the Stow Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, one from the Town Hall Restoration Committee, and one other that I may not be able to enumerate. One that's a planning board and conservation request. That's it.
Nothing from me tonight.
I only have one small thing. I did go to a meeting with the town hall employees, town building employees, on the 4th regarding the town administrator selection process. I thought it went pretty well. The moderator and I went, we explained the whole process to them, the desire to have an employee participate as a member, that we made clear neither the moderator nor the selectmen really want to, designate one of our few spots for an employee, but it's certainly a plus. There was a lively discussion among some of the employees about why do you have to be a Stow resident? Because the only employees who would be eligible would be Stow residents. Only Stow residents are available for the screening committee. But the moderator really answered that one. And then they stayed afterwards. We left, and they had a bit of a discussion about how best to go about, having one representative, or whoever it may be, if there's an employee on the committee, how to have that person keep everyone informed. I don't know what they ultimately voted to do. I don't think they're going to like a union would vote on a rep. But it started to sound to me like if there's an employee on the screening committee, there's going to be some way that person is going to be able to consult all the employees and speak with more authority than just their own individual opinions. At least that's what I hope.
Well,
Mr. Bird?
I'm not sure about any one person on the screening committee speaking with any more authority. Anyone on the screening committee can talk to whoever they want, but I don't think that's how it's set up. But maybe I misunderstood the chair.
No, they're just saying, they're trying to come up with a mechanism by which that person could consult with other employees.
Not that their voice would be weighted on the committee, but that they would be
Exactly.
able to fully represent all staff in that,
Right.
rather than only one department.
We'll see how the screening committee shapes up.
Right.
Won't we?
And last but not
They
least, Mr. Hawks.
I was present the other night, so we missed your smiling face. A couple of us were gathered around the tree. And I just wanted to give a shout out again to Karen Stams. Remember, I think it was 4 years ago, she came to us about 2 weeks before Christmas and said, wouldn't it be great to have a ceremony around this great tree? It happened because of her.
And you.
I greased some skids. Gleasondale. No, we don't have a liaison to Gleasondale. But there's been comments made recently in a public forum concerning this one-lane bridge. And I was going to comment very briefly. There were harsh allegations made by people in town who know not whereof they speak about the difficulties we are all familiar with. I want to commend someone you may be familiar with, Ms. Farah, for putting the facts out to light a candle instead of curse the darkness. That's all I want to say about that. At one point, there was a discussion about absentee participation. It wouldn't work. I'm going to be submitting my resignation effective December 31st. This has been a particularly meaningful meeting. My 7 years, 8 years, we haven't had a meeting like this. I'm going to miss it. Thanks.
This was good. This was a good meeting. And Mr. Hawks, he said he's going to be submitting his resignation December 31 for personal reasons. And you've been on this board, I think, 7 years or more.
Eight, maybe will be 8 years.
Okay. And I will miss you. It has always been a collegial board, and I think that this was a good meeting for you to go out on. This was about as close as we ever come to a heated discussion. And that's not bad at all. And you were a big part of that. I will say that when you first ran, I had my concerns, not as many concerns as I had when Brian first ran.
Very collegial meetings, very collegial.
I had some concerns because my only interaction with you had been as a single issue guy, a Lake Boone guy. And
I didn't mention Lake Boone
right.
in my last liaison report. Forgive me.
And you know, you certainly wound up being an advocate for the lake and being our liaison to the lake, but you went way beyond that. And I just want to thank you for everything that you've brought to this board. I want to thank you personally for your friendship. I want to apologize to you for the other day rushing off the phone when we were speaking because I thought my dogs were going to get killed by a car coming in the driveway. I felt badly. You know, that was our last time talking about Selectmen business on the phone, and I basically hung up on you. But I'm going to miss you, Don. You did a great job. You did a great job for the town as a whole for over however the hell many years, 40 years.
No, well, I was veterans agent for 12 years, I was on Light Boat Commission. Let me just regain my composure a little bit. I don't want it to be, anybody to get the impression I'm resigning because of this discussion tonight. And you said for personal reasons, thank you. But those personal reasons include, and made no secret of it recently, that I have a wonderful woman in my life. And we are going to be in Florida very soon. We're leaving sometime before the next snowstorm, hopefully. By the time my Coast Guard colleague has his, hopefully by the time he has his next equipment breakdown in a snowstorm, I'm going to have my feet in the Gulf of Mexico.
Good for you.
That's why I'm resigning. Just clarification.
Understood.
Thank you.
Other members of the board? Mr. Ryan?
Well, you know, Don, it has been a pleasure to work with you for all these years. You know, it's as, you know, while we haven't always agreed, one of the big things is we've always had respect for each other. I've always tried to make sure I listen to you, I've learned from you, and, you know, agreeing to disagree sometimes is the best thing. And, you know, I do appreciate your guidance, your wisdom, and your friendship over these years. It's been very good, and it's much appreciated.
I'm going to miss Shecky, by the way.
He'll still send you a Christmas card.
Yeah.
You can watch our videos.
I will.
Yeah.
I will.
You can stream his comedy shows on Netflix.
Now it is time to leave.
Mr. Birch, do you want to add a few words?
No, I agree with everything Mr. Ryan said. My colleague, Mr. Hawks, has always been fair and accurate. And if I've chaffed him a little bit about Lake Boone, I'm sure he'll forgive me.
No, I'm scarred forever, but that's okay.
But thank you for your time.
Thanks.
And your service.
Courtney?
Mr. Hawks, I haven't had the pleasure of serving with you for years, but I have watched you on TV. And
Get a life.
with great respect.
Every time you mention that, it's just so sad.
But now I don't have to watch on TV anymore. I can come to all the meetings. It's lovely.
I'll have a live cam set up at the fishing pier in Venice, just for you.
As long as the feds don't find out about it, right?
I would like to thank you for our personal friendship, and I hope
Thank you.
it has not been affected by our
No, of course not.
disagreement this evening.
Of course not.
I trust not.
Of course not.
Well,
And
I don't know where you guys are from. I'm from New York. That was not a disagreement. That was Thanksgiving dinner, as far as I'm concerned, without the cursing.
You don't have to travel that far. You come to Orange.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
He knows something.
Yeah.
I don't know, I live out in the woods, way out in the
Of
woods.
course, your familiarity with liquor wasn't questioned tonight.
Don, I'd like to say that personally, I've enjoyed immensely our conversations. Leave aside the work for a moment, but just the two of us sitting across from each other. I've always believed that old sayings that if a person's worth knowing, they're worth knowing well. And I make a point of trying to know people, and I think that's terribly important because that's still is the most important part of my life, for knowing people well. And I think I got to know you well. I hope you got to know me some. We've had some just some interesting and memorable conversations, leaving the work aside. And I appreciated that time. Hope you did, and I hope to see you in the future sometime. I don't, you know.
Funny thing about the map, as I looked at it last time, the most convenient way to get from Florida back to here, and I'm going to be spending some time at Moosehead Lake, easiest way to get there is to come through Massachusetts. I'll be around.
And I'll see you up in Maine.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, we can catch up with a friend.
I've been there.
And he's a county
And I didn't get
commissioner.
thrown out of any places last time, so that it was up there, so I'm still welcome in Greenwood.
A former selectman of this town is now county commissioner of Piscataquis County, Maine. I think we know who.
Been to Wayne's place.
Wayne Tatel.
Wayne.
No, Wayne Tatel.
Erkin.
I had,
I'll entertain a motion to express our appreciation, gratitude, and best wishes to Mr. Hawks.
So moved.
As he enters a new chapter. Motion made and seconded to express our best wishes, appreciation, and gratitude to Mr. Hawks as he enters a new chapter in his life. Further discussion? You want to discuss this?
Don't blow it.
I told him before we had this protracted, good policy decision, I said, I'm gonna filibuster till midnight. I almost made it. No, I have nothing further to say, thank you.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very
Abstain.
much. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Motion
Move
to
to
adjourn.
Second.